morning. Hello, and welcome to the Saturday morning show. I'm sorry to say we don't have cartoons. We're here to talk about the decline, not of Western civilization, but that of NOFX. In their own words, it's been a while since we've done something like this. You will find this channel is chock full of videos like this where we kind of look at a piece of writing, we look at an article, and we try to read the tea leaves, try to figure out what happened, what's going on. So if you got a bowl of cereal and you're feeling froggy, huddle in front of the TV or the cell phone or the iPad, whatever you may be watching from, and join me as I try to figure some stuff out, try to read between the lines, maybe I don't have to read between the lines, because we got one of my favorite things to look at is oral histories. They're so interesting. One of my favorite books is PKM by Legs McNeil and Gillian McAnderson, and I like it because it's interesting to hear the story in the actual words of the people who lived it. And so that format, which has existed for a long time, and really I feel like was popularized by that book particularly, has sort of become transformative, especially when it comes to articles. You see a lot of articles, the oral history of this, the oral history of that. It is that's a big selling point for me. And so hold on, sorry, I'm trying to make this public. Okay, good. That's good. Okay, I'm just checking things. You got to be my own producer, because that's the way it works. That's the way it works sometimes. That's the way it works here at the Frumess channel. Okay, we're good. Everything's golden. All right, let's talk about NOFX. All right, first and foremost, let me qualify my own relationship with this band as a music gourmandizer. I like NOFX. I have a great respect for NOFX. I am by no means well-versed in NOFX in the same way that I'm well-versed in, say, the Misfits or Sublime or the Pixies or any of the bands that we do a lot of sort of stuff on. I haven't dived super deep. I've read the Hepatitis Bathtub. I have their discography. I've listened through their discography. And like I said, I want to say I have a general working knowledge of NOFX. And so that's where I'm coming from. So like I said, so I like their music. I saw them live for the first time when they came to Brooklyn for their final tour. I was like, if I don't see NOFX at least once before they break up, I missed them at Riot Fest in 2016, which really bummed me out. And I was like, I just got to see them once. I loved Backstage Pass. Backstage Pass was a great tour documentary. I watched it while I was trying to make my own sort of tour documentary that fell through the basement. That's another story for another day. But so I really like NOFX. Here's what I like most about NOFX. And I'm going to tell you something I don't like about NOFX after I say the thing that I like most. I have such a deep, profound respect for what they do, for them and what they've done as a band. So, and I think it's important to say this before anything else, because, if we do dwell on the negative, whatever, I think let's get this out of the way. I mean, NOFX were an uncompromising juggernaut of DIY, the epitome of not selling out. Okay. So like, even if maybe they sold out a little bit, whatever, to sort of, I don't think they ever did, man. They say it. They wrote a final song that they played before they played The Decline at their final show called We Did It Our Way or whatever. And it talks about how they were just so uncompromising over 41 years of their career, where they did whatever it is that they were going to do. They didn't change for anyone. And that's really the definition of selling out, right? The definition of selling out is, are we changing ourselves fundamentally? Are we changing our beliefs in the name of the almighty dollar? And I really don't think they did. You know, they did have that controversy, the Las Vegas controversy. They were dropped from something. I wasn't particularly dialed into the controversy. I do know what they said. I thought what they said was not okay. Obviously, what they said was stupid. I think they knew it was stupid. I think they realized how stupid it was eventually. But the overall point here is that they're like one of the most successful independent DIY bands of all time. You know, Fat Mike built up an empire. With the band, they built up an empire. Fat Records from nothing, from a $20,000 investment that he got from his father. And you know, there's a lot of people who are like shitting on that, or I've seen people just like to shit on Fat Mike in general. I don't really have an opinion on Fat Mike, to be honest with you. I've watched some of his interviews on Fat Mike's Fat Mike. I understand he's just like a divisive individual. I love that he's created this punk rock museum, because there is no punk rock museum, and punk rock deserves its own museum. I will say this, it is one thing that is kind of weird or kind of problematic with creating a punk rock museum is, especially when you're like one of the bands that's in the punk rock museum, it's kind of like history being written from a certain perspective, I guess. I haven't been to the punk rock museum, so I really can't formulate a weighted opinion. I do plan to visit someday. I would love to go and do the whole tour thing. I'm sort of jumping all over the place. I'm just trying to think. Oh, Fat Mike being divisive. Yeah, he's a polarizing character. He says inflammatory things. He gets into beefs with people. Some people stand by him. Some people hate him. Some people accuse him of just like trying to like choke a dollar out of, every nook and cranny. And to that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Honestly, what are you talking about? So what? So what? Like, God forbid someone like sells their wares and makes money doing it. I mean, there's nothing more empowering than becoming rich or becoming financially successful from your own art and from artistic endeavors in an entrepreneurial way. Isn't that what it's all about? That's like one part of creating art is commerce, and it's so much better when uncompromising art is at the center stage instead of commerce being at the center stage. You know what I'm saying? I'm really getting distracted here. Fat Mike, decisive guy. And then you have the band. There's the whole band, right? And we'll get into that. Let's dive in. I'm talking too much. Well, let's jump into this, okay? Hold on, I'm sharing my screen. So this is an article from Spin. This is from Spin, and it's written by Josh Chesler on October 9th, 2024. So it came out 2 or 3 days after they played their final show. Obviously, it's timed out with their final show, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna have this giant oral history come out on the heels, and then another announcement that was made, or that came to light, a revelation. I didn't even know that Hopeless Records still existed, but Hopeless Records bought Fat Records. So Fat Mike has actually sold Fat Records. Now, if you want to say that's selling out, I don't know. What does that qualify as selling out? I don't know. That I don't know. I don't know why even talking about selling out is important. It's really not. It's inconsequential, because at the end of the day, they really did. That song, Our Way, is absolutely a representation of what NOFX was all about for 41 years. The first, 5, 10, hey, I'm trying to do a stream down here. Stop jumping. It's my son watching TV directly above me. He's jumping. These walls are paper thin. Yo, chill. Friggin' 9-year-old son. Love him to death, but sometimes he jumps right when I'm trying to do a stream. We're very informal here, as you can see. So, what was I saying about Fat Mike and about the band? 41 years, man. 41 fucking years. And the first 10 of those years was like nothing. Talk about grinding. This is a band that grinded and grinded and grinded until they really struck like real success in 1994 with what I guess is considered to be the iconic NOFX album Punk in Drublic, right? that's the, with Linoleum is their big hit, right? And that's the one that they independently sold so many copies. I wonder how many copies of Punkin' Drublic they sold. Was that through Epitaph? That was through Epitaph. So it wasn't through Fat Records, but they sold a mega ton of records. Let me see here. How many copies of Punkin' Drublic were sold? Let's see what that says. 1 million copies, man. 1 million copies. Who put out Punkin' Drublic? I'm sorry, I just had to check this again because I'm not well versed. Let me just check this real. Okay, it was put out by Epitaph. Fat Mike was a producer on it. The album has received positive reviews 6 years after its release. The band became, it became the band's only gold record. So in 6 years, they had sold 500,000 copies in the 90s. That is monumental when you think about that. I wonder how many albums NOFX has sold entirely. Does it say? Which is their only release to receive a gold certification. Oh my God, this is incredible. They've sold 8 million records worldwide, making them one of the most successful independent bands ever. That is insane, dude. That is insane. So I'm saying, like, you got to have like respect. I have a lot of respect for NOFX. I really, really do. In those regards, man. Now, here's the one downside. I'm going to say this before we dive into the article. Here's my one critique. What I don't like about NOFX. I think their music is very sort of contradictory in the sense that, like, from an eclectic standpoint, not that like their sound can get very bland. That's what I'm trying to say. Their sound can be very bland. You hear it. Listen, Smelly, incredible, fantastic punk rock drummer, although some people think he drums too fast. Like, it's like every fucking song is the same drum beat, but then they'll like do like a change up. Suddenly they're doing like something reggae or ska, then El Hefe, throw some trumpets in there. So they do step outside of like that sort of archetypal 90s punk rock sound. But it just, I just feel like sometimes it just gets, it's like, I feel like every song kind of blends together. And that's why maybe NOFX's catalog is never really like, it's never like fully set in with me. It's never clicked. I've listened to many of their records. I appreciate, there are many songs that I love by NOFX. I love Eat the Meek. Of course, who doesn't like Linoleum, I guess. I like Pump Up the Volume. I like the songs that they had on those Punkorama albums were fantastic songs. Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's continue on. The Decline, the last quarter century of NOFX in their own words, written by Josh Chesler. We already said that. Punk legends, NOFX call it quits this weekend in front of 15,000 fans in San Pedro, California, with Fat Mike Burkett, Eric Melvin, Aaron El Hefe, Abeyta, sorry, El Hefe, and Erik Smelly Sandin playing their final show. The story of their retirement isn't a short, explosive one, but a long, drawn-out saga spanning multiple decades and complicated relationships. That this is what I saw a bunch of people posting online about, like, how like this article really sort of breaks down some things and like also poses more questions. So I'm really kind of curious to know what is in it. That's why I was like, oh, we gotta have this on the channel. People might ask, why would you want to stop doing this? Being in a punk rock band, specifically a punk rock band, is probably the best job in the world. And what's interesting too is the fact that, like, you're on the, being in a punk band can mean like touring around in a van, eating pizzas every night. Like, NOFX is at the pinnacle of punk rock, on the punk rock mountain, right? They have a well-oiled operation. They tour comfortably, I would imagine. They travel all over the world. They have markets all over the world. I mean, it really is, what an incredible job. They're prolific. They've written so many songs. I mean, it's insane how many, I can't even keep track of all the NOFX albums, or it feels like releases, and that's what's amazing too, is that, like, they really sort of, I think that they do the collector thing kind of right. You know, they do the whole collector thing. They put out records. Some people complain, oh, you know, another variant here and a variant there. I mean, those guys are fans of punk rock. Fat Mike is a fan of punk rock. You know, he's doing the punk rock thing of different records, you know, making it fun to collect his music. Like, I can appreciate it in the same way that the Misfits made it fun to collect their music, you know? So Burkett says that being in a punk rock band is probably the best job in the world. He says this as he sits in one of NOFX's handful of trailers at Chicago's Riot Fest, the penultimate stop on their final tour that stretched over 18 months. I'll tell you why. Generally, we would tour about 3 weeks at a time and never more than 4 shows a week. So they really, you know, they got it down. They got it down to a system where it wasn't like destroying or burning them out. They have like a nice rhythm that allows them to run the marathon of 41 years. You know what I mean? We would work for an hour and a half per night, and the rest of the time we just do whatever we want. When you're in a punk band, you don't have to practice as long as you know the songs a little bit, although apparently they suck. They suck live. When we would fuck up every night, people think it's charming. But if someone like Lady Gaga or Barry Manilow plays a wrong note, it's a big deal. That is true. That is the beauty of like the punk rock veneer. Although but there are some punk bands that, you know, look at Black Flag was militant when it came to rehearsing their material because they wanted to be such a well-oiled machine. And I feel like no matter how much the Misfits rehearsed, they sounded like garbage as we know from listening to those recordings, you know, but that could be due to equipment and the quality of the productions that they were putting on or a part of, you know, DIY punk shows in the early 80s. Actors have to fucking learn lines and do 16-hour days. Writers have to fucking write original material all the time. All of the other artists have it so much harder than we do. It's the best job in the world. Why would I give that up? So that's the sort of question Fat Mike is posing here. Well, there's no way we could explain it. So here's the extremely abbreviated story of the last 25 years of NOFX as told by the members of NOFX. So really, I guess the fractures in NOFX's eventual decision to retire started 25 years ago, right? Here is Fat Mike with dreads in a dress on stage with boots. The Decline, 1999, Pump Up the Volume, 2000. And you know, it's funny. I'm thinking like 25 years. 1999 was 25 years ago. That is absolutely terrifying. The Decline, by the way, that was the last song that NOFX played live. And, you know, it's the longest punk rock song ever. It's 17-minute opus. I think it's a great song to sort of finish. Like, how could it have been any other song but The Decline? They did write and play a brand new song at their last show, which I think is, you know, I mean, that's the thing. It seems like NOFX, despite the fact that some of their music sounds very similar and like bland and derivative, they always were like like, oh, we're going to do Backstage Pass. Oh, I'm going to write a musical. Oh, I'm going to do a concept album called Cokie the Clown. Like, they were always doing something. Let's start a festival called Punk in Drublic. Let's do the Punk Rock Museum. Well, in fact, Mike was doing the Punk Rock Museum. Like, there was always something going on that NOFX was doing. And they just seemed to have like a vitality that could never end. But, you know, I mean, here we are. They don't exist anymore. So 25 years ago was The Decline and Pump Up the Volume in 2000. It's insane. Eric Melvin. There was a good decade or so after Punk in Drublic where we were just riding the wave of success and possibilities of what we could do. We kept making record after record and talking about how we could keep making these high energy, riffy stuff without just making Punk in Drublic over and over again. And I'm sure there's 1,000 NOFX fans that would punch me in the face right now with what I'm about to say, but they kind of did make Punk in Drublic over and over again in one way, shape, or form. And sometimes the songs are catchy, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just all the fucking same to me. I can't get over it. I can't get over it. Maybe I just really need to sit and do an album by album listen and really like marinate. It just, I don't know, man. We were very intentional in making sure it wasn't just the same thing. I'm sure maybe to a NOFX fan, that's true. But because I'm not like a diehard NOFX fan, it just all sounds the same to me. Maybe that's what it is. We knew we were going to piss off some people, but that's punk rock, and that's exactly what we needed to do. Quick sidebar, super quick sidebar. You know who's a band who doesn't make the same record over and over again, and in fact is just like, fuck you, we're going to do whatever we want, and like is so awesome when they do it? TSOL. TSOL is one of those bands that just also like journeyman, you know, they're just out there. They're not staying with the same sound, and they're always doing something new in recording. And obviously I think that's kind of stopped now. They're not going to be doing much of that anymore. And Mike Roach is, you know, gone. We know about Mike Roach's situation, and his GoFundMe is still up, by the way. So you should go Google Mike Roach GoFundMe and throw him a few bucks if you can. He suffers from cognitive decline that prevents him from playing with the band. He has a what seems to be a permanent fill-in bass player at this time, which is very sad. But that band was uncompromising in doing whatever they were going to do and pissing people off and alienating people who had come to appreciate and love their sound. I can't keep sidebarring like this, because if I do, we're just never going to get through this. El Hefe says, the scene was the biggest it's ever been. We were the headliners on Warped Tour like every other year and playing huge festivals with bands like Rancid and Bad Religion. Right. At 1999 is like almost, you know, that's the beginning of the height of Warped Tour before that decline happened as well. Right. And they're playing with bands like Rancid and Bad Religion are also, you know, Brett from Bad Religion, he has Epitaph Records, which is NOFX's label, and NOFX worship Bad Religion and take a lot of their sound and influence from Bad Religion, which they're very, very transparent about. And so, you know, Rancid, Bad Religion, NOFX, Pennywise, this is like the core of that 90s punk rock heyday, right? You know, and obviously you throw Green Day in there, but Green Day and Offspring kind of branch off, right? Because they get albums that transcend the punk rock world, that even NOFX selling 1 million records of punk and drub like is dwarfs or pales in comparison to what, you know, Green Day and Offspring would do, which would in fact boost everybody else's sales, like NOFX, like Rancid, like Bad Religion, right? In the 90s. It really was. It would the 90s were the alternative music renaissance, where alternative music got pushed up so high that it almost, I mean, it became alternative rock was a mainstream genre. And now obviously that's shrunk in crazy, crazy ways. But it's funny how El Hefe thinks of that as a scene. It's not a scene. You're above a scene, dude. You are firmly planted at the bottom rung of alternative rock, which is a mainstream rock and roll movement in the 90s. It was about that time when we went to Japan and we were discovering that we were all big everywhere else too. I think we were just discovering that we were pretty big all over the world. We could play anywhere and an audience would come. And that was demonstrated, as I said, in Backstage Passport, right? That was absolutely proved to be true, because wherever they would go, and they seemed to go all over the world, and they were doing shows. Eric Smelly, we'll just call him Smelly. Everything was on cruise control back then. So there's no definitive thing that jumps out to me. Mike was all about being the businessman, not the drug guy. He wasn't the cross-dressing look at me guy yet. It was like the era of Green Day and Offspring it was like the era of Green Day and Offspring kind of calmed down, but we found a very solid niche in the music world. Right. So Offspring had that big album, and then that's not true though. He's wrong, because in 99, they released Americana. Offspring did Hey, I'm trying to do a rock and roll commercial down here. Calm yourself. Offspring did Americana. That record was explosively huge. Pretty fly for a white guy. I mean, it's insane. That was insanely big. But I think what he's trying to say is like, it's the lull between Dookie and American Idiot, right? And punk rock has been pushed so far up that, they have this beautiful little niche and they're doing well. And I guess, you know, Fat Mike had transitioned once Fat Records started in the 90s. Fat Mike had become a businessman. He went from being a punk rocker to being a businessman. And then obviously he sort of expands, I guess, out of that into all the things that Smelly is saying. Fat Mike says, when I wrote those albums, Bill Clinton was in office and you really couldn't complain about anything. He bombed some big pharmaceutical companies' laboratory in the Middle East and deregulated banks. But no one saw that as a bad thing at the time until the real estate crisis. I was more concerned with the prison system at that point. As you can tell by the lyrics, I was going to go into prison rights more because that's what I was interested in. You could really be mad about politics at that time because there was a fucking surplus in the country and things were generally pretty good. But boy, do things change really fast. The War on Terrorism, 2003. So we're jumping 3 to 4 years ahead now. El Hefe says, and I think what they're doing is they're kind of taking us through the eras until the last decade or so, which, you know, seems to be when the rift really started to rip open. The War on Terrorism. And I know this because I read the Hepatitis Bathtub, and I know that eventually Fat Mike does start getting into drugs. He wasn't a drug guy. It's funny. Eric got sober. Smelly got sober. Smelly was the drug guy in the band. He even left the band for a brief moment in 85. He got sober, right? And I think like El Hefe and Melvin were always, I'm trying to remember, Melvin, jumping here and there, but it was really the two polar sort of drug guys in the band were Smelly in the early years and Fat Mike in the later years. And then Smelly sobered up and Fat Mike was never not sober, but then became not anti-sober, but like the opposite of sober or whatever you want to call it, or the opposite of whatever. El Hefe says, so the War on Terrorism. El Hefe says, we were having a lot of fun our whole career and we were making great money at that point. And he talks about like in the book, he talks about like, I was able to finally buy a house with the money that was coming in. I mean, NOFX, here's the one thing that is kind of interesting. NOFX kind of became a corporation, like a brand, right? Like it does. And that's kind of what happens with all bands. It doesn't matter if you're a punk band, it doesn't matter what kind of band you are. When your band, eventually you stop being individuals that make up a band and the band itself becomes a brand, and the music and the albums and all that is one element because you have merchandise. There's a lot of stuff that like, and really your logo begins to represent a certain type of thing, aesthetic of whatever that can be monetized in a variety of ways. I know this is like really sort of weird corporate talk and glasses and a bathrobe while drinking coffee on a Saturday morning. Hey, chill with the jumping. Chill. I really don't want to get up and go up there and be like, hey, you're being too loud, you whippersnapper. We were making good money at that point. Then Mike got really heavy. We were having a lot. El Hefe says we were having a lot of fun our whole career, and we were making a lot of great money at that point. And then Mike got really heavy into politics with Rock Against Bush and all that. And that was the first time we realized that some of the punk people were Republicans and would just be like, fuck you. Some of our friends' bands didn't want to be involved because they were right wing or whatever. But the whole thing was a lot of fun for the most part. And that is interesting. I mean, look, Billy Zoom, huge conservative from X, huge conservative. Exene, she's a conservative. We all know about Johnny Ramone. It's a weird thing. And obviously we know about Michael Graves, who was sort of the antithesis of what Fat Mike was at that time during that election. That was the first election I ever voted in, by the way. I voted for John Kerry. Michael Graves had started conservative punk, and that got him ostracized in a insane. People were like, what? You're a conservative? Like, what the fuck? And it's kind of weird. Even though Johnny Ramone and members of the X are conservatives, the idea of punk rock as a whole being like anything conservative or going with, conservative ideals and values is so antithetical to what punk rock is supposed to be about. It doesn't mean that punk rock has to be one thing in particular, but it generally speaking, the idea of punk rock, it's counterculture ideas going against the grain, like the Bad Religion album, right? And the idea of conservative politics is going with the grain. It's fucking stupid. It's just whatever. It's like being this is a real thing. Being this really fucking happened. You had whatchamacallit, you had conservative, right-wing conservative kids, listening to Rage Against the Machine, unironically, it's just really funny. Rage Against the Machine. Not that Rage Against the Machine is like, I don't know, because I have my own thoughts about Rage Against the Machine. Whatever. I'm getting off subject. Smelly says, we had some goofy, stupid lyrics, but there was some political shit in there on that earlier stuff. I think it felt like it gave Mike a purpose, which in turn gave us a purpose, because Mike is the leader of NOFX, right? Mike is the spearhead. I've never been that political of a guy. I vote and all that shit, but I've never been on the picket lines or anything. Bush and Cheney really fired Mike up because he knew it was all fucking bullshit. And Mike goes in depth about all this stuff in the book. And I remember at that time, I was not into NOFX at all. I was getting into punk rock. I was really into early 70s punk rock. I was into the Dead Boys and the Ramones and the Stooges and the Misfits and like anything that was like from the 70s. I was really into. I was not, obviously I liked those 90s punk bands too, but not enough that I was like buying their records. But I remember those compilations. I remember the Rock Against Bush stuff. I remember when Fat Mike was pushing with that. And so he's saying that Bush and Cheney really fired Mike up. That was a whole time, man. That was an era right there. Just in general, that time, the post 9/11 America was like an insane thing when you think about it, because he knew it was all fucking bullshit, just like pretty much the whole world did. It gave him purpose, and it gave him a voice beyond just being in a punk band. Looking back on it, those were some pretty important years for us because it gave us a foundation of sincerity, which is cool. But here's why I think it's kind of bullshit too, and I'm going to get to that. I'll get to that in a minute, actually. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I'll tell you why I think it kind of bums me out, because like whatever Bush and Cheney were, like that was one thing. And then now look at Trump and the fact that the same energy and effort, like they just sort of like went, like you're not going to do the same thing for Trump, that was kind of bullshit to me. That was kind of bullshit. It's like, how are you going to put such an effort? You're not going to rally again. Like, so what? So like, there's other thing. It's like, you're not going to pour your energy into it. And I'm a firm believer of, walking away from something and choosing to invest energy doesn't mean that you're giving up on something, but, or mean is it's okay to pour your energy. As long as you're pouring your energy into something, that means you're not fundamentally giving up. So I'm not saying that they like gave up or whatever, but I do think like it's kind of a little bit disingenuous that you could feel so passionately about what Bush did and not feel so passionate about like the era of Trump. It just boggles the mind. But, to be fair to NOFX, you look at the flip side, look at the fatigue that South Park received. And those guys are conservative guys, but they make fun of anybody. The fatigue that South Park developed, they stopped talking about Trump because it was just so ridiculous. Like they couldn't invest any more energy in talking about how ridiculous Trump was. So they stopped doing it. They're not even covering the election. I mean, South Park, that's the thing about South Park. It's like a current event cycle, right? Because they can turn out a show so fast. So the idea that like even South Park is turning away from Trump politics, why hasn't anybody tried to fuse the word Trump with politics? Trump politics. I guess it doesn't roll off the tongue. Maybe. Is that why? Whatever. In any case, Fat Mike says, I never worked so hard for something in my life, and I definitely never worked so hard to make the world a better place. And the world would be a better place now if Al Gore or John Kerry would have won. He's right, actually. And it's sad that Al Gore and John Kerry both lost. We raised over $1 million for John Kerry, and I was at the Democratic convention rubbing elbows with Larry David and Michael Moore. Back then, with a civil half-hour conversation, you could turn a Republican into a Democrat. That's not true anymore. And it's funny. Back then, you really could be like, I hate that you're a conservative or Republican, but we're both Americans and I love you and you're my fellow American. Like, I can't say the same today with Trump. Let's put it this way. I can't speak specifically. There are people in my life who I know who are going to vote for Trump who like, I can't look them in the eye, man. I can't. Now I know that admire certain, artists who are like Billy Zoom, for instance, who I fucking love to death, even though he's an idiot for liking Trump. Like that I can kind of compartmentalize, but like people that I know in my day-to-day life, like there's some people who I know are going to vote for Trump. I can't even look them in the eye. I'm like, how it's like a litmus test of stupidity. How stupid could you possibly be? You know what I mean? Like, how could you fall for that? How could you fall for him? Like, it's just so insane to me. So it's so interesting to hear Fat Mike talking about how you could have a civil half-hour conversation and turn a Republican into a Democrat, or at least let me tell you something. I'm sitting here talking about Republicans. I mean, Democrats are also pieces of shit, man. They're both parties. They're both pieces of shit. They're pieces of shit, man. Democrats, here's my favorite analogy I ever heard in my life. The Republicans will say it's too expensive. We can't take you to the zoo. And the Democrats will say, oh, we're going to take you to the zoo, but not today. And doesn't that just represent everything? The Democrats who want to change, who want to be good guys, but don't actually like really kick the ball down the road far enough. They're happy with the status quo because they have investors too. If they have interests as well. It's just very sad to me. We need more political parties. We need more. We need like 20. We need to make this country more democratic than it is. It's just a fucking shame. And I have voted. I have voted in the last election, and I'm going to vote in this election too. But make no mistake, I am jaded, and I can't. And don't even get me started on the electoral college. I'm sorry, this is getting too political. You could turn a Republican into a Democrat, or at least get them not to vote for George Bush just by giving them the facts. The reason why, and that's the sad thing, because people actually like looked at facts and then changed their mind. And today, nobody looks at facts. Facts do not exist. You can literally look a fact in the face and go, you're not real, fake news, blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't help that the media sucks. The media fucking sucks. The media is no good either. The media, like, there's no integrity in the media. So it doesn't help. So that when Trump does say something's fake news, it doesn't help that the media doesn't do us any favors. So it's all fucked just by giving them facts. The reason why, so he gives a reason here. The reason why I'm not doing anything like that now is because you cannot change the mind of a Trump supporter. So I'm not going to waste my time. I mean, that is a very simple yet very realistic truth as to why you wouldn't want to waste your time. I still think that not being vocal enough about Trump, but being more vocal about Bush is kind of disingenuous, but whatever. El Hefe says, when we dropped that album, we played Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and we were backstage getting ready to play that song. And they said, hey, can you guys be careful not to say this one phrase in your lyrics? We don't want to create controversy. And Mike says, sure, okay. And then Mike did it anyway, which is exactly what you should do. Always, 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 always. I love that Nirvana didn't play the song that Saturday Night Live wanted them to play. They played something else. Fat Mike says, NOFX has always been a political band. The songs on the war on errorism aren't that political, really. It's just a really angry album with a political cover. It was the first album that we did that hit #1 on the Billboard Independent Albums chart, and it was featured on CNN. The separation of church and skate is a guitar sound I'd always wanted us to have, and we use the same guitars and amps ever since to get it. Melvin says, finally, we hear from Melvin for the first time. Melvin says, we almost forgot that politics and social awareness were part of the punk rock scene that we came out of. It was still in Mike's writing all along the way, but we would adjust to every record we did. Then he was like, let's see how much influence we can have on this because we're really in the public eye now. But we also found where the trappings were and the disappointment of how slow and impossible to move the system can be. That is also true. And maybe you do want to put your energy into something that you can change. And I can appreciate that too. So maybe I was a little harsh on them, kind of not like turning away from this during the Trump era. On election night, Mike and I were drinking and having a bit of a party watching the results. As soon as it was clear that Bush was going to win, I remember him saying, I'm going to go take ecstasy. And it almost feel like he hasn't stopped since. So it's interesting. It's almost like Melvin is alluding that the fissure in Fat Mike really begins with Bush winning in the White House. And, you know, it sounds like a sticky situation. And you know what else is sticky? Riot stickers. Riot stickers. I believe Sharpie Riot is a big NOFX fan. That's right. Riot stickers. We're running a special deal with Riot stickers. You can get 100 die cut stickers for $33. What is a die cut sticker? It's a sticker that's made with a computer guided scalpel. So look, if you want a sticker in the shape of Fat Mike from NOFX, or the NOFX logo, and maybe you want to ask them first so you don't get sued, you can do that by going to ridestickers.com/Frumess. That's FRUMESS. Link is down in the description. You can order 100 stickers for $33. I always inverse those two. Or you can double that order. You can get 200 stickers for $66. Or you could triple that order. You can get for $100, $99. You can get 300 die cut stickers with free shipping. All when you go to ridestickers.com/Frumess. So if you have a band, if you have a punk rock band like NOFX or whatever, I mean, what a great punk rock deal that is. And I'll tell you, Sharpie, awesome friggin' guy. He's going to work with you. He's going to work with your design. You're going to be in good shape. Let's listen to the theme song from the guy from Less Than Jake, and we will continue on with Fat Mike's slow descension into ecstasy.
Posters and promo cards, there's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. We are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot stickers, we are the bomb.
And that is a promise. Okay, let's keep rolling in. Fat Mike says, we had a party at my house on election night, and I had a shot glass full of Valium and a shot glass full of ecstasy, depending on how it went. We lost, but we all decided to take the ecstasy anyway because we were celebrating how we work to make the world a better place. And that's the beauty of the hepatitis bathtub, which is also an oral history of the entirety of NOFX's career up to the year 2016. And I guess they could really stand to do an updated a chapter 2, or I guess this is part 2 of that. If you really consider it, this really is the hepatitis. I should change the title of this to the hepatitis bathtub part 2. But the reason, here's a perfect example of why the oral history is such a great format, because we hear from Melvin, we hear his POV, and then we hear Fat Mike's POV, and it allows you, like a documentary does, it allows you to sort of like shape the story through the different POVs and come to your own conclusions about what you are hearing. Smelly says, the night that Bush won in 2004, Mike called me up right after crying. It didn't happen. But I mean, how can you take that personally? You're just one voice out of how many millions? It's not about you. So through these three different people's perspectives, it really sort of helps us to paint a picture of that particular night. That's the beauty of an oral history. That's what makes it so great. El Hefe says, I just remember him being more upset than we'd ever seen him before. He was a mess. We went on stage not long after and had the worst show. He was pissed off about the whole thing and would not let it go. Smelly was trying to talk to him like, dude, use it to get us pumped. Do something about it. Raise awareness. Shit happens, but he could just not let it go. Melvin says, I still think about it like, wow, is that the thing that broke Mike? It was one thing he couldn't do because up until that point, everything else worked. I mean, it's true. Like they think about all the impossible things that they had done up until that point as an independent band. I mean, they made the impossible happen, right? I mean, just to be a successful musician, it's an anomaly. It just does not happen. So to make something like that happen, why wouldn't you think you can make other things happen? I mean, that's like, isn't that like Prince's whole mentality? I hear Kevin Smith talk about Prince and how like Prince made the impossible happen. So when Prince asks for a camel at 3:00 in the morning on a Tuesday night, he like very matter-of-factly goes, why not? why is that impossible? Like to him, possible and impossible is a whole different other thing. It's so interesting, you know? So it was one thing he couldn't do because up to that point, everything else worked. Nothing's that black and white, but it's kind of been all coke, ecstasy, and ketamine flowing into his body ever since that moment. So that's insane. So that really sounds like it is the water. According to the guys, it sounds like that is the watershed moment that begins this new era for the band, as well as a new sort of demeanor for Fat Mike. At some point, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I just started finding my own passions again. I love playing music, so I started focusing more on playing a good live show. I love being active, so I pay attention to my body more. I love going deep into my thoughts and emotions, so I got more into that. It was right around that time that our paths, which were always slightly different but pretty parallel, started to feel like they were going in different directions, and we weren't connecting as much anymore. I mean, it really is. It's very interesting how, you know, when you look back on something, how you can kind of see the like how everything kind of plays out. And maybe you need to like they needed to finish as a band before they could really sort of track this history. And maybe that's perhaps why they never did an update. Because there was supposed to be a Hepatitis Bathtub Part 2. Wolves in Wolves Clothing, 2006. This is 2 years later. Fat Mike says, this is one of our top 5 albums, even though I kind of fucked up and put too many songs on it. It's an okay record. I like that record. If I took 3 songs off, I think it could have been a perfect album. And there are songs I left off that I should have put on, like Everything in Moderation, especially Moderation, and the Mel Gibson song, I'm Going to Hell for This One. It's my favorite production on any album that we made because Bill Stevenson, who's producer and Descendants drummer, made us all play everything absolutely perfectly. Those songs are way more political than the war on terrorism. People think that USA Holes is about the Titanic, but it's about the fucking government and the ship with all the Jews on it, the MS St. Louis. I thought it was so funny. The captain hit an iceberg and started a war on the Arctic because that's what George Bush did. We got attacked. And if you believe we got attacked by 15 Saudis, 4 people from the UAE, Lebanon, and Egypt. So he started a war with Iraq. It's like the U.S. bombed France. So France started a war with Mexico. I mean, that is fundamentally what happened. That is fundamentally what happened. And we invaded a country. We invaded Iraq, which is why when I think about, I have to say this. I'm sorry. When I think about the way people talk about the Middle East today in America and like Western ideals, and I go, hey, hold on a second. Look at you clutching your pearls. Do you not remember what your own fucking country did 20 fucking years ago? They fucking invaded a fucking country. They toppled its, horrible like Saddam was a horrible dictator. Obviously, I mean, he's a fucking dictator. He was a monster. But he was a monster that kept worse monsters in check. When they got rid of Saddam, what came? What came? ISIS, motherfuckers. So it's like this weird, like, sort of like, we live in a world of black and white. We need to destroy terrorism. But it's like, dude, like, there's a world, like, we live in a world of gray, man. We live in a world of gray. Do you not understand? Yeah, Saddam, terrible human being. But we have our thumb on Saddam. We can handle Saddam. Like if Saddam goes, there's a power void, and then all these even crazier motherfuckers who are going to enslave women. Talk about apartheid. Like are going to enslave women and take over the fucking Middle East, or try to take over the Middle East and establish a new caliphate. It's insane. It's insane. Sorry. Sorry. Smelly says, Mike's always been a good songwriter and a good visionary musically, but that's when Mike's songwriting got really good and the recording process got really bad. So Smelly disagrees with Fat Mike. Bill Stevenson is phenomenal, but that's about the time we started using Pro Tools. So we didn't have to get into a room and figure out the songs beforehand. It would be like, oh, we're recording next week. I don't even really know the songs. We'd get into the studio and Mike would be like, just play a drum beat. because he doesn't look at drums as a musical instrument as much as just something to hold up the rest of the song. My drumming really suffered on the recordings because I never got a chance to work shit out. But in the end, I think Mike's songs actually blossomed because he could experiment with different things on the computer at that point. That is, I have to tell you, that is so, what a profound observation by Smelly. And it's kind of interesting. That kind of like speaks to what I was saying about the drum beat just being the same drum beat over and over again. I mean, here's Smelly kind of admitting that, at least as late, as early as, or as late, if you want to say, as 2006, although I would argue it started maybe even earlier than that. But this sort of idea of like, you're taking it's another, so it's interesting. So we're seeing that there are different factors here. Factor number one, Fat Mike is taking drugs. Factor number two, the band in the studio, there's a rift because of the use of Pro Tools, because of this. Maybe it's sort of fracturing some of the interchemistry musically for the band. And as Melvin said, Melvin's like, oh, like, you know, we were always kind of like slightly on different paths, but we were run parallel. But now there's a rift forming. So what's the thing that's holding a band together? And this is true for so many bands that have been together for years. When people start to like differ in personality, or like they don't gel as people together anymore, what brings them together is the music. Look at the Beatles during their most strained years, during Let It Be, at their most strained time. Whenever you see it on the camera, you see it in Peter Jackson's documentary, whenever the camera is rolling, they're having a great fucking time because they're just doing the music thing that brought them together in the first place. But now Smelly is talking about how like maybe that's even kind of like splitting up too. So that is really, really interesting. Fat Mike says, that era was a dream for us. Everybody on Fat Records sold so many CDs and made so much profit. Bands like No Use for a Name and Lagwagon were buying houses, and bands were just making a killing. It was easy because they're making great records. And I don't know the business ethics of Fat Records, but it sounds like it was a great label to actually be on. It sounds like people got paid. Like, it sounds like Fat Mike had the integrity to pay bands, unlike say like SST or Glenn Danzig or whoever. Like, he's actually, you know, taking the fiduciary responsibility of paying royalties seriously. El Hefe says everyone was doing pretty good and getting well taken care of at that time. That's when we started focusing on playing these huge festivals all around the world with bands like Guns N' Roses, The Prodigy, and Metallica, but also with everyone from Coldplay to ZZ Top. Sometimes I'd be surprised when I'd start talking to a band and they listen to us. A lot of those bands were here today, gone tomorrow, because that's the way the pop scene works. But we partied with a lot of cool bands during that time. Everyone from, I remember 303 was on Warped Tour. They were like an emo band, to Steve Aoki and Skrillex. That's El Hefe said that. Sorry. Why did I think that was Melvin? Melvin says it was still important to us collectively to try and see as much of the world as we could. We loved going to out of the way places: Iceland, Israel, South Africa, Jakarta, Manila, Hong Kong, because it felt like Europe and America and Canada were wide open to us. So whenever we had the chance, we would want to go where the challenge is. I still have some great memories of walking on the Great Wall of China and playing, I can't pronounce that. It's the town in Iceland. My God. What the fuck? Ah. Oh my God. Where's that ad coming from? Shit. Was that, what the fuck? Dude. That felt like such an invasion of privacy just now. Whatever. All right. No worries. It's over. So they have this Iceland city at 4 a.m. when the sun was low on the horizon, things you can't really see anywhere else around the world. And that's obviously they through Fuse TV, they did a reality show called Backstage Pass. It was a fucking awesome show. Fat Mike says, aside from the other touring I did, the Warped Tour every year, NOFX on even years, and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, that's Mike's other band. They did covers. It's like a super group, you know, Me First. And Mike left Me First and the Gimme Gimmes and was replaced by CJ Ramone. So he would do NOFX on even years and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes on odd years. So he was always on Warped Tour. We were with bands like Bad Religion, and we would just always park our bus with them, or Joan Jett, Bouncing Souls, Less Than Jake, all the old guys. It was so fucking fun. And even though they barely paid us shit, it was just a 9-song, half-hour set. We always had a blow-up pool, tons of drugs, drinking, golfing, and riding bikes. It was summer camp with all of your friends, and there were no rules. It didn't, yeah, I bet. And I think someday, it hasn't happened yet, really happened. We saw what happened with Anti-Flag. Someday, I think that Warped Tour is going to get their Me Too thing is going to happen with Warped Tour. It's going to something's going to come out. I have a feeling it's going to explode. I alluded to this previously in one of those Anti-Flag videos. Someday the bottom is going to drop out and all the secrets are going to get revealed. So he says, and there were no rules. It didn't matter if a big band would come out, like Sum 41 was platinum. Kevin Lyman, he ran Warped Tour, would make them go on at noon on a small stage. And if you were a dick band, you would get fucking shunned by all the other bands. I think even fans who went didn't realize how cool it was for the bands. We were running poker games with Good Charlotte and hanging out with Christian bands like Under Oath, even though I convinced them to quit and I made so much fun of them. So I didn't realize that. I guess Fat Mike made Under Oath quit Warped Tour because he made fun of them. That's really funny. Melvin says, I don't remember the exact timing, but it was around the end of that when I feel that we started to see some of the first cracks in Mike. I know he had some personal stuff going on, but then the drugs and the sycophants. What is a sycophant, you say? Oh my God, I didn't realize I didn't have the thing up. What is a sycophant? Let's look it up. A sycophant is a person who acts obsequiously. Sorry. What? Now I need to look up obsequiously towards someone important in order to gain advantage. Basically a suck up. Basically a yes person. So the drugs and the sycophants started becoming more and more. And doesn't that always happen with like one person kind of elevates and they get sycophants and it gives them a big ego and yada, yada, yada. That's also when he started having 100 ideas going on at once. And it was hard to tell which ones we should be taking seriously. He always held tight to his beliefs that he's doing the right thing, but sometimes that includes self-destructive things. So this brings us to Coaster in 2009. On the last tour of NOFX's 2008 documentary reality show Backstage Passport, we were coming back from South Africa. I told the band at the airport, hey guys, I need to take a long break. I'm hurting way too much. Smelly said, do what you got to do, bro. Hefe said, it'll be hard. We're not making money, but do what you got to do. But Melvin said, get it together, dude. We need money. What are you fucking talking about? Taking 8 months off. That was the first time I thought to myself on that plane ride, I'm not going to grow old with Eric Melvin. Who would say that to a friend? Don't clean up. We need the money. That's a fucking narcissist. Holy shit. Damn. All right. The shots have been fired. So they finished a tour. Fat Mike is admitting that he's hurting. And here's the POV. Now we're going to hear Melvin's POV of this, right? We're going to hear Melvin's POV. So we're seeing the cracks grow larger. We're going to hear Melvin's POV. And here's my one question. It's like, we need the money. Like, in all honesty, if you're making such good money and you're doing as well as you're doing, like it sounds like they're working paycheck to paycheck. Is their lifestyles and expenses that insane that they need to keep the engine going? Like they're not making enough money that they can rest for a bit. We obviously know that there's definitely a wealth disparity within NOFX. Fat Mike, with all of his ventures and things, even, he's the one who owns the label with his ex-wife, Erin, Fat Records. I mean, he's making a lot more money than any of the other guys in NOFX, but it sounds like, this is insane that like they're literally their lifeline is touring is kind of insane, that there's not enough passive revenue coming in from merch and album sales. Even in 2009, even at the decline of record sales, they're still got to be making good money. Obviously this, the touring machine would become even more important to the bread and butter of their revenue stream, in the next decade, as we saw album sales just become non-existent. But this is very interesting. So this is it sounds like for Fat Mike, this is the moment for Fat Mike. He wanted to take 8 months off after touring, at least from his point of view. And he says, hey, I need to take 8 months off. And Smelly and El Hefe are like, now we see where the real sort of divisiveness is. There's a little divisiveness. So here's what I'm getting from the dynamic of NOFX. Sounds like El Hefe kind of being the newest member of the band, even though he's been there for 30 years. He's kind of like, I don't know. He seems like he's kind of like, he'll go with the flow of anything. He's kind of like the Ringo in that kind of way. And then Smelly is a little less so like that, but also kind of mild-mannered, and that Melvin is very strong-minded in certain ways. I'm sure Smelly is too. That's interesting. But sorry, I keep saying this pinpoint of like Melvin saying, hey, I don't want you to stop. Melvin saying we can't stop touring. Melvin saying we can't stop the touring machine. Get it together. We need to be making money. And Fat Mike realizing in that moment, I'm not going to grow old with Eric Melvin, a guy he's been touring with since 1983. I mean, it's insane. That's really insane. How many years have they been together at that point? They've been together for 26 years at that point. And Fat Mike thinks that he's a narcissist. Here's Melvin's rebuttal, okay? Melvin says, we tried to make a second season of Backstage Passport, and Mike was like, we did all this footage and it's just more of the same. That's going to be boring for people. But I was like, I don't think so. People want to see more of it. Maybe if we try to do it 4 or 5 or 6 years in a row, but a second year, come on. That's when I realized that our intentions might not be aligned, because if two people are doing the same thing for their own reasons, even though they're doing it together, they might not be striving for the same goal. From the beginning, I always thought we were doing this just to do it, and the reward was that we were going to do it. But I remember having a discussion with Mike at some point around then, and he was like, after the show, I'm going to do a bunch of coke. That's my reward. And I was like, isn't the reward enough just that you get to do this? So it's interesting how Melvin, and maybe Melvin remembers that plane ride that Fat Mike is talking about, but to him, it's almost like, it sounds like, I don't know if he was asked about that moment. And it also could be that the author has decided not to make mention of that moment, but he's just like, it's like a nothing. It's like nothing to Melvin, or maybe Melvin doesn't remember even saying that. That's what's interesting about the oral history. So Melvin's dwelling on the fact that Fat Mike is doing a bunch of coke, and Fat Mike's own way, he's saying, I'm hurting way too much. Is that his way of being like, I recognize that I can't do this bowl of coke, a bunch of coke, as a reward after every single show? El Hefe says that was around the time when CDs were becoming worthless, which is why the album is called Coaster, because CDs became coasters since no one's playing music on them, which changed a lot of things. And that perhaps is why there's a million different variants of a million different NOFX records on vinyl, because they have an intrinsic value that fans want, even in a streaming world, and people get pissed that there's so many variants, but it's like, how is a band supposed to make fucking money? I mean, Jerry only realized that in the 2010s too, and he did a fucking great job. Maybe not musically, but release wise, Jerry was great when it came to the stuff he was releasing. Like the actual physical releases were amazing. The artwork was cool. The colors were amazing. He did variants. He made it fun. Jerry only made buying physical media fun. How about that? That's the truth, man. He knows that his music is collectible in that kind of way. He recognizes that people want variants. And you know what? Glenn, who was doing it as, back in the 80s, like maybe even sort of, through osmosis, through, sort of looking through the side of his eye, was like, Jerry's doing all this. Jerry's got the right idea. I better do this too. And then, Glenn started doing the variants again through Cleopatra. And that was really, I mean, maybe it's gotten a little much now. I don't know. It was really fun when Jerry was doing it, but it's not so much fun when Danzig is doing it. If I'm being honest, there's too many. I mean, Glenn, maybe it's not Glenn's decision. Maybe it's Cleopatra's decision. Do like 9 variants of the same fucking single and they all cost $22. That's kind of like annoying. I don't know what, I don't know. Is that what it is for NOFX? I don't know. Are they doing a similar sort of situation? Maybe they are. In any case, so that did change a lot of things, but you'd still imagine that they've been saving their money and that they would have money in 2009. Everybody's royalties were dropping dramatically and the whole scene was changing. First, they dropped in half with Napster and stuff, and then they got cut in half again when everything went digital. So everybody's bank account got hit badly. Right, but like, aren't you investing the however many hundreds of thousands of dollars you're earning being in this fucking band? Like, you know, like, again, I don't know how the split works in NOFX, but I would imagine a lot of bands are shareholders. Were NOFX a shareholder band? Are you not getting a shareholder interest? Like, look at the Sex Pistols. The Pistols are a shareholder band, which is so insane considering that the estate of Sid Vicious gets 12.5% of the share. You know, when Glenn Matlock gets the other 12.5%, but he wrote all the goddamn songs. I mean, that's so crazy to me. But point is like El Hefe. Does El Hefe not get any kind of share in NOFX? That's what I'm interested in knowing. Melvin says, that's when it started to feel like the whole band was more about, we have to do whatever's making Mike happy. And I started to check out a little bit more. Looking back on it, I think that might have made it worse because it was a lot of enabling. I could see he was suffering from something and we were all just went into support mode. Like, this is my buddy. I love him. We've been through so much already together. I'm going to do whatever is going to make him happy and keep making him happy. Here's an alternative to that. Are you doing whatever to keep him happy because he's the you know, without him, there is NOFX and you want to keep NOFX going? And so therefore everything is predicated on Mike's happiness. I don't know. Smelly says, referring to Coaster, that record was so hard to record with Mike because he would record a song and then just leave for 2 hours. So I'm like, what am I supposed to record? I don't know what the fuck to do. And then he'd come back and go, you did it wrong. He was obviously high on coke during a lot of it and being really irrational. And it was really fucking hard for all of us. That's also when his singing really started to suffer because coke numbs your fucking throat. And I think by this time, Smelly is, I forget when Smelly gets sober, but Smelly's sober by this point. That he got sober around the turn of the century, right? I think he got sober in like 2000, something like that. So Smelly's sober and he's got to put up with, you know, bandmates, or he's got to work with or deal with bandmates who are not sober. You know what I mean? That's not easy for being, especially I know, being a sober person and dealing with people who are on drugs. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing at all. And you know what's interesting about drug people, what I've noticed, and again, no offense if you're a drug person out there, drug people, you know, socially, they go off. They're afraid that their drugs are going to be judged. Their drug intake is going to be drugs. So they start to hide it. They start to hide it from everybody else out of fear that they're going to be judged. So it's like, oh, I can't do what I want to do. I can't comfortably do what I want to do around you anymore. I have to go off with anybody else who is on my level, you know? So him disappearing for 2 hours, that tracks. That makes sense to me, at least, you know? Fat Mike says, I love that album because my goal, and most people don't know this, was to put out an album that sounded like a classic LA 80s punk band. It was a blast for me, but it's not as fast and less distortion than we usually use. I love the acoustic guitar we did on 1 Million Coasters, and it's a really cool progression. It also has the Agony of Victory, which isn't even a NOFX song. It's a song from my musical Home Sweet Home Sweet Home. And I Think I'm an Alcoholic is the best thing Karina Denike, a keyboardist, ever did with us. We don't play that song live because it's too hard, but I like it. But I'd like to because it shows what a big part of NOFX Karina has been, and for way longer than people know. Self-Entitled, 2012. You know, one thing that's great about NOFX and NOFX just in general, they've always been really good. And maybe this is Mike. I don't know if this is Mike's doing. I'm guessing Mike has always been really good at puns. Everything is a pun. And I think their best pun is self-entitled. I love that so much because, self-titled record, right? It's a self-titled record. You call it you reference it as self-titled. So self-entitled just is a really fun pun that works for me. Fat Mike says, I think it's our perfect album. I don't know if I've ever listened to self-entitled. Maybe I have. I'm going to go listen to it if that's what Fat Mike thinks is their perfect album. Fat Mike says, I think it's our perfect album. 12 songs and they're all fucking good and tight as fuck. That was the first time I was really on cocaine and oxycodone. I wasn't hooked on oxy yet, but usually when I go and do an album, I go in sober because I want to fucking concentrate. Halfway through this album, Bill's like, what are you doing? Because I just started partying and you can hear it in my voice. I love it so much. I think I sound like Milo, the vocalist of the Descendants on Milo Goes to College. I had this cool tone from the oxy and Bill was really working with me. Bill was pissed though, and I barely finished the songs. It's just, I don't know. It's really interesting. It's interesting to hear, like, Fat Mike's point of view is very different from the rest of the band. And you can clearly see that of all the division is really between Fat Mike and the other three guys, right? Like that's the bottom line end of the day. That's what it is. That's the divide. I'm sure there's probably smaller, like inter divides within their four person dynamic, but the big one is that. I mean, I guess anybody knows that. I guess that's kind of obvious, right? Like I'm speaking the obvious here, but like I said, this is a discovery where I'm discovering what it was that caused the end of NOFX by reading this article in real time. And I haven't read this article previously, so I'm discovering and sort of processing it as I'm speaking to you, which is what we do here. El Hefe says, all I remember is Mike being on a lot of cocaine, drugs, and alcohol, and it was really tough to get anything done. It took a long time to finish it because we would record and then re-record and then re-record. Fat Mike says, I wrote Xmas Has Been X'd the night before, and I love those lyrics. People think I Fatty is about me, but no, it's about Fatty Arbuckle. I read his autobiography, and it was really good. Sell Out is another one on that record because we were recording at Hurley's studio in Costa Mesa, and I was taking the train back and forth from my dungeon. The day before we stopped recording drums, Eric Melvin goes, I have some songs, and one of his riffs was pretty fucking good. So I wrote Sell Out and put chords behind it. That was the quickest a NOFX song has ever come together. It took like 2 hours. Smelly says, I think that's when we started to have conversations with Mike where he would say, I'm tired. I don't want to keep doing this. I'm not having fun anymore. But we were all like, dude, why don't you fucking change your lifestyle a little bit and try to prioritize getting some fucking sleep? We're fucking lucky to be here. I don't even know that we deserve to be here. I mean, that is a really like clear talk about sober. That is a sobering attitude from a sober person that makes a lot of sense. It's like Fat Mike is looking at the band and he's not looking at his lifestyle, and I'm sure that's what those guys saw. And we heard very well, for Fat Mike, he felt alienated the moment that Eric Melvin said that to him. But who knows? Now I'm starting to think, as I'm reading this, I'm starting to think that Fat Mike's perspective on things is way more skewed than any of the other guys. That's what I'm starting to think a little bit. Smelly says, I think all of us just love playing live and love being with each other more than anything. Whereas Mike was looking at it more as a job and he was just tired. I understand on some level that being a frontman is a different story than being a drummer or a guitar player. All we do is just show up and do our parts. Whereas a frontman has to be the face, the personality, the voice, all that kind of shit. I just don't have the capacity to understand what it's like because I've never done it. Melvin says, Mike's been complaining about doing live shows for a long time. I attributed that to just that he couldn't stop partying. Even when he'd call himself sober, it was because he was only doing coke and vodka, not painkillers. Huh. First ditch effort from 2016. Fat Mike says, I was hooked on painkillers and coke. I just crushed the painkillers every day, and I did cocaine in the bathroom even when we were in the studio. We'd come in really late, and I was kind of out of my mind. There are pictures where I'm wearing latex dresses, heels, and nipple clamps while doing vocal takes. It was a crazy recording. Cameron Webb, the producer, brought in Hefe when I was passed out at the hotel to do vocals, even though I had Spike Slauson from Gimmies and Johnny Casey from Old Man Markley to do perfect harmonies. If you hear the harmonies Hefe did on Heavy Petting Zoo, our voices don't buzz. So I either have to do the harmonies on my own or get someone who sounds like me. Cameron didn't like that, so he brought in Hefe and Zoli from Pennywise. I didn't notice at first, but there's one harmony in California Drought that Hefe did wrong. It's a note that doesn't belong there. There's also a guitar rhythm on that song that I think has never been done before. It's a very weird rhythm and chord. It's interesting how these guys are talking about the relationships. These guys are talking about stuff, and Fat Mike is dwelling more on the artistic output. And again, I have to wonder, is that the author choosing? Is that the author choosing to do that? Or is that, is that Fat Mike deliberately avoiding some of that relationship stuff, but Fat Mike's resentment is coming out in the music. Well, apart from what he said about Melvin, it sounds like what Melvin said, or that really stuck out in his mind. That really hurt him. It's a very weird rhythm and chords, but the whole record has weird production. Maybe that the author is including this because they're going album by album. And so he's having Fat Mike talk about the albums while the band is talking about the relationship, which is an interesting kind of choice for driving this narrative story in this article. But the whole record has weird production. It's muddy because Cameron didn't make us play perfectly like Bill did. And also I was just wasted the whole time. It's got some cool songs like Oxymoronic, but it doesn't sound as good as our other records. That's my bad because I was just too fucking wasted. El Hefe says, it seemed like that one took even longer to get finished than the ones before it. And we put it out, and the TMZ thing, that was the punk rock bowling controversy. Maybe we need to cover this in a separate video, talk about that. So the punk rock bowling at Las Vegas controversy, in short, the band always makes jokes live. Like they do this sort of, frontman stand-up act, Jack from TSOL does that too, but they say they could, NOFX is notorious for saying very spicy things. And they made a joke about the tragedy that occurred in Las Vegas around that time when, what happened. And a lot of people lost their lives, and they made a really insensitive joke on stage, and it happened right after, and it struck a nerve, and they were shunned. They were dropped from punk rock bowling, even though it was like, I think Punk and Drublick Fest was involved with that. The guy that posted the original thing, I think he was seeing us for the first time, but that shit went viral. He's talking about the joke that they said. I don't condone what was said. This is El Hefe. I was the guy on the other side of the mic, like, dude, that's not cool, man. Let's change the subject. So El Hefe is, many years on, 6 years on, distancing himself from that situation. Smelly says that was right in the middle of the cancel culture bullshit, which is fucking bullshit, because when one voice has the authority to cancel the other, it's not an even playing field. I mean, that is very true, actually. Who's to say I can't cancel them for something I don't agree with? Well, but the difference there too is, and not to say that you shouldn't be canceled for something really shitty that you say, but you should be, it doesn't mean there can't be backlash. And that's been the case for fucking forever, in time immemorial. You say something controversial, you get backlash for it. And I think to an extent, a lot of people kind of overhype cancel culture as being that. Oh, I'm being canceled. It's like, no, you're just receiving backlash because you said something really stupid. And eventually it will blow over and you'll be able to keep moving on. I think people that, the Me Too thing, like that's when you really get canceled. That's when you literally, what happens is you become a living dead person. People dead you. You are no longer, everything you ever have done is tainted, and you are erased as a human being, measured by the sole mistake you made. Or let's not call them mistakes. Let's call them crimes too, right? Because that's what they are. They're crimes. Like, sometimes they're mistakes and sometimes they're crimes. And, that's when people get erased, like really erased. So, I think that a lot of the sensitivity towards cancel culture is really just like not, recontextualizing it as like, hey, oh, I said something really stupid and I'm receiving backlash and I'm going to have heat for a while and then the heat will die down. I can keep going about. That's why. And then from the other side of things, nobody ever really gets canceled because they just come back. And it's because that's not what canceling is. It's not actual canceling. Canceling is when you erase a person, like you literally erase them. You erase them from conversations. Anytime they're brought up, you have to tack on. I do it too. I'm guilty because I'm afraid that like everybody like, oh, like I can't talk about Roman Polanski if I don't bring up his country. I can't talk about Michael Jackson. Those people are fucking canceled. You know what I'm saying? But notice we've talked about NOFX this entire time. We haven't brought up the maybe I did actually earlier on. Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. And then there are some people who do the same thing as other people and they don't get canceled at all. Like people overlook it. So it's a very inconsistent thing too. I also just want to say, if you do like if you play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. If you do something stupid, like, look at what Michael Graves did. Michael Graves was erased for his political beliefs, for his dumb beliefs, right? Like he put his beliefs out there and he was effectively erased in a variety of ways. You could call him ostensibly canceled, right? Like straight up, the dude was canceled. And it affected everything he had ever done was suddenly measured by his stupidity, and his insensitive, idiotic remarks that he would make. You know what I mean? But there's something to be said. And then he victimized himself through that process. He really victimized himself. But there's something to be said for like, oh, woe is me. I can't say whatever I want. Like you can say whatever you want, Michael Graves, but there's consequences. And the consequences were people didn't want you around. They erased you. Like that's the reality, man. So it's like, it's a weird thing. It's a really, really weird thing. And then there are some people who get canceled. The extremism of their canceling is just insane, where you literally, you make one remark and just everything you've ever done is erased. I mean, I think with Graves, he didn't just make one remark. He like doubled down on all the shit he was saying. He just kept saying it. He kept digging a hole deeper and deeper. We've talked about it. He was making 6 figures touring and he destroyed it. He destroyed it. Nobody destroyed Michael Graves for Michael Graves. Nobody canceled Michael Graves for Michael Graves. And it's kind of interesting because you look at Nobunny, someone you're not all familiar with, but one of my favorite musicians, Nobunny, who I am still enamored with from artistically. But Justin committed crimes, man, and he canceled himself. He retired from music. He announced what he did, and then he, in an effort to, I guess, atone, retired completely from music, dropped off the face of the earth. Probably too, because who knows? Maybe I don't know if there were any legal fallout from that situation. It's just a weird, like fluid, sort of subjective conversation thing, whatever you want to call it. Let's keep reading. So who's to say I can't cancel them for something I don't agree with? So Smelly says, so when the Vegas thing happened, everybody was all worried. I'm not going to lie. It sucked, but I was like, dude, it's going to fucking blow over in 40 seconds, which is literally what I was just saying. Oprah Winfrey is going to fart on camera, or Kim Kardashian's left nipple is going to come out and everybody will forget about it. And that's literally what has happened to our consciousness within the media. The media like perpetuates that too. But it's like the news cycle happens so fast. We become so hooked into social media that we forget the public consciousness forgets things so quickly. And that can also be a double-edged sword, because there are things that get overlooked and then suddenly they get brought up from the past and they happened years ago. And then suddenly they become this contemporary issue, even if they happened years and years and years ago. It's just so strange, so friggin' strange. But everybody was so herky-jerky to be defensive on the right side of things that we lost out on our own tour. It hurt, but life went on. So they lost money. They lost a lot of money. They got dropped. They got this. They got that. Melvin says, it really started to feel like Mike thought that only he has the keys to the band's success. And if we didn't do what he said, we weren't going to maximize our success. That kind of drove him into this crazy frenzy. I think what the author is trying to do here, he's trying to like Fat Mike is talking about the artistic output. Smelly is talking about one thing. Melvin's talking about another thing. He's kind of like weaving all these different threads together, actually. Maybe that's what's happening. Although he's about to talk about the Vegas thing. So that if we didn't do what he said, or we weren't going to maximize our success, and that kind of drove him into this crazy frenzy. So Fat Mike was like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to, lose my mind. Melvin says that shit in Vegas happened because we were so much in the public eye and so reliant on sponsors, which means that we had to answer to them for them. So that's what's interesting too. And that might be the one moment that NOFX really kind of does sell out in a way. They are beholden to sponsors and have to sort of acquiesce to the sponsors because they are beholden to the sponsors. And in that way, maybe they kind of sold out a little bit, because if they hadn't sold out, they would have just kept plowing along, So they were so much in the public eye and so reliant on sponsors, which meant that they had to answer to the sponsors for what they said. Fat Mike, was just going crazier and crazier because he wanted us to have all these huge successes. He would say, oh, I know a guy who said they can get us a thing on Netflix, and I want to do something with that. But the whole time I'd be thinking, we're from LA. Dude, every idiot knows somebody who wants to try and get a thing on Netflix. You're being that guy right now. I love him, and I know he just wanted us all to be successful and have something to retire on. But it's like we already had our process, and we knew what we had to do in order to make money. Fat Mike says, it feels like things really fell apart around then when Eric moved to San Diego, because it was hard for him to drive to the studio in Costa Mesa and everything. I'm a control freak, and they're my songs. But getting anyone in the band to come to the studio and work on the songs was impossible. Eric was the only one who would be in the studio with me earlier in their career, but then it became just me and Ryan Green, or me and Bill Stevenson. Bill's a fucking monster in the studio, and he and Jason Livemore never make bad sounding records. I'm so glad we got to work with them, but that's just how it was. Melvin says, by that point, Mike would just tell us whatever he would tell us. He'd come to me and be like, I got all these songs for the next record. But it was like the Netflix thing. They never really materialized. Or he'd be like, I got this riff, and he'd send me them on, there's a lot of typos in this article. Or he'd send them to me on an acoustic guitar, but he kept stopping and starting and changing the chords each time. Eventually there would be a song there, but he gave us even less and less to work with. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting to see the difference in opinion here. I really can't weigh in on, in one way or another as to which is which, right? So here's the single album. Single album came out in 2021. And I think this is when we knew that they were going to end, right? Because it's 18 months from now, they pretty much were done. No, not 18 months from then, but I think that's when they were maybe making the final decisions. Here, let's read about it. Let's find out. El Hefe says, I think the drama within the band all started between Melvin's wife and Mike. She would start going off on Mike and the way he is when he's drinking and on drugs, and he's going off on her. Then Melvin gets pissed off, like, that's my wife. And it would just go back and forth. They went on for years, back and forth and back and forth. Finally, he said, your wife can't come out on tour anymore. She can't be at the shows. She can't be on the stage, or I'm not playing. Holy shit. Damn, that's friggin' spicy. So there you go. So there you friggin' go, man. And imagine if that really stuck in Mike's craw, what he said during Coaster, at the end of the Coaster tour or whatever. And he said, I need to take 8 months off. And Melvin was like, no, you can't take 8 months off. But that resentment probably, amplified in the dynamics with the wife. Who knows? Who friggin' knows? So your wife can't come out on tour anymore. She can't be at the shows. She can't be on the stage, or I'm not playing. It's just so much drama, says Hefe. Smelly was trying to facilitate everything and make peace by going to Mike and say, come on, man, just let her have a little section. But Mike kept saying, if she shows up, I'm not playing the shows. I'll cancel the shows and the tour. It was pretty bad. She's allowed to come to the last 3 shows in LA because Mike said, you know what? I'm fucking over it. I just want peace. I think he tried to make peace with them for the first time in a really long time because he was holding on to that for so long. So talk about divisive. like that right there, there's the big cleaver. My God, I can't even imagine how that strained the relationship between Melvin and Fat Mike. Like that kills that effectively kills the band. I would say that right there has to be the death blow, right? Like that's the ultimate death blow. Like everything up till now is, strained and frayed and like, wearing away at the seams. But that right there is just like, wow. Melvin says, I've already been grieving what's happened to our relationship within the band. I feel like Smelly, Hefe, and I are closer than ever, but Mike and I have drifted off. I just have to appreciate what we've had, and I'm trying to look at what's happening now as another transitory phase. Things might be different. Things might be different in another year or two. I don't know what that means for the band, but as far as our personal relationship, we'll see where it goes. Maybe the pressure of being in a band together will change the way he feels about me. I think that's my biggest point of grief in all of this. Grieving the personal relationship and what's happened to it over the last decade. I don't know exactly when it started, but it just slowly got to the point where I found fewer and fewer points of connection between us. We're getting older and we've done so much together. So I still reference those. I still remember us in my parents' beat up station wagon. Well, we beat it up, driving around alleys of Beverly Hills looking for houses that were being renovated with empty pools. I still remember sitting at immigration, getting into Peru or something or somewhere, and they're trying to rattle us like, you're not getting in. We're searching for everything. We're searching for everything. Like drugs, I think he's relating. And that's the weird thing about, I think that's the weird thing about not just in bands, but just in all relationships, right? Like you get to a point where you start to grow apart from people that, you love and know and are connected to. And it's like pretty soon the only common ground you have with them is your shared history. But sometimes that's enough to get you through. It all depends on the frequency of how often you're with someone. If you get together with them every once in a while, I think it's perfectly fine that all you have left is that shared history, because then you get together, you have a good time, you reminisce about old times and it's good. And then you go off into your now separate lives. But when you're together 24/7, or when you're still working together, but you're separated like that, it makes it a lot harder because you're different. You're just fundamentally different from this other person. And you need to go off in your own way. You need to just go be who you are elsewhere. It doesn't mean you don't love that person anymore. It doesn't mean that you're divided from that person, but just that you're different. You're fundamentally different now. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that too. Fat Mike says, Melvin and I have a rift, and it's the greatest heartbreak of my life. I've never had my heart broken like this, and I feel like it didn't really get bad until COVID. That's the first time that NOFX actually got into heated discussions, not fights, but some things were said that were lame. But it sounds like for Fat Mike, that occurred a lot earlier, going back to that airplane conversation, right? That's the first time that NOFX actually got into heated discussions, not fights. But some things were said that were lame. We don't make money selling records anymore. No one does. So we were only making money playing live, which is, again, that's the state of all music, right? Generally, merchandise and, t-shirts and stuff and guarantees at live shows. When we couldn't tour anymore, that caused a lot of stress for everyone. And some people were more desperate than others. Ooh, that's a knife to the side right there. Some people were more desperate than others. Who is he? But the one really cool thing is that we would not let our disputes, which are gnarly, affect the magic that we have on stage together. He and I were the ones who started the fucking band together, and that magic is still real. And maybe that's why they were able to continue on through all of this strife. You're able to continue on despite that situation. Melvin says, I've never had a brother, but I have a younger sister, and it feels like the term brother isn't even close enough for Mike and me. It feels like we have the same DNA and had the same balance of chemicals within us that operated all of our hormones, urges, perceptions, and pointed us in a direction. I don't know what's on his mind anymore, and he's kept his true mind really well protected for at least a decade or more. There were times where we used to talk about things, Like when he first told me he was considering divorcing his first wife, that felt like a big thing. And maybe it felt like him admitting some defeat. But now he doesn't want to talk about things. He doesn't want to hear opinions or what we want to do. He thinks he's got it. So it's almost like an insult to him to hear the advice of another person. Maybe he thinks he's trying to make a better life, where even if it's not here now, he's kind of aimed in that direction. He's expressed things like that, but just kept partying, and being surrounded by people who want to party doesn't feel like a good connection for a better life. I guess it really comes down to that I want to be more connected to people, and he wants to be connected to more people. And that's where, so Melvin wants to be more connected to people, not necessarily more people. And Fat Mike wants to be connected to more people in general. That's where we've gone totally different, even though I get upset at him for the choices he makes, because most of them seem to be self-harming for him. And some of them have also affected my world in negative ways. I just have to say, you can do whatever the fuck you want to yourself, but fucking leave me out of it. We have to respect our old agreements. We have to respect what was once a companionship. And so I guess, you know, in the sense of like, they've had interventions for Fat Mike, and Fat Mike has gone through periods of quasi, as what Fat Mike says is sobriety, and they disagree. And they talk about that in the hepatitis bathtub. In the book, it sounds like drugs really were a big divisive point. Smelly says the pandemic hit and the world was thrown into fucking chaos like a zombie apocalypse. And all of a sudden I was no longer employed. Overnight, it went from everything's cool, we're just taking a little bit of time off, to I guess we might not ever be able to do this ever again. We didn't know what was going to come out of it. I got a little bit of money in the bank, but nothing crazy. My wife has a good job, but I was not financially or emotionally ready to be jobless. In order to participate in society and in my family and show my wife and my kids that I'm not useless, I started delivering groceries through Instacart. Holy shit. Oh my God. Wow. Sorry, I just was not expecting that. In 2020, 2021, that Smelly, after touring with bands like Guns N' Roses, after making, I mean, Smelly had to have made hundreds of thousands of dollars from NOFX in decades of touring and stuff. Come on, selling 1 million albums in the fucking 90s. You didn't put some money away in the bank. You didn't invest it. Like that's what blows my mind. Why, even though Fat Mike has more financial fingers and pies, why does he have so much more money than the other guys? Not to say like that, actually, maybe that does make sense, but why on earth don't the other guys have some kind of stable nest egg? So, you know, and I got to tell you, the amount of humility it takes to do something like that. I really, my heart goes out just hearing Smelly talk about that. Like the amount of humility that it takes to go from being a drummer playing to tens of thousands of people, you know, every night, to delivering food on Instacart. And could you imagine if somebody recognized him, like what that must do to the self-esteem and psyche, especially like, you know, artists and musicians, they suffer from, you know, imposter syndrome, even when you're fucking like successful and famous. I can't imagine what that could have done. Maybe he'll talk about it. Let's hear what he says. He says, I started delivering groceries through Instacart. It sucked, but I didn't know if NOFX was ever going to do anything again. That's when I really started. That's when I started really doing the surfboard thing, because I was making $100 a day doing Instacart. And I was like, wait a minute, I've been shaping surfboards for 10 years. Why not just fucking do that? But it was scary and weird for everyone, not just us. So he found an alternative passion outside of music that allowed him to, you know, focus on something that was not the band. Wow. Oof, Smelly. And I'm sure that, you know, being sober helped him negotiate that. Man, the humility, the humility to do that. There's a lot of guys, I'm sure there's a lot of musicians out there who would be like, I'm me. There's no way I would ever fucking be making $100 a day delivering Instacart. Fuck that. You know what's crazy too? Like a guy like Smelly could probably figure out how to like work YouTube and monetize an account and be making way more than $100 a day just doing YouTube stuff. You know, I don't know. El Hefe says, I did a Valentine's Day sketch comedy show at the Pack Theater in Hollywood, and it was the first time I was the main guy. Jen Razavi from the Bomb Pops was my guest, and we had a great time. The show was sold out, packed with people outside who couldn't get in. And literally 2 weeks after that, news of COVID started dropping. I was in the middle of acting classes, and they said, sorry, we've got to shut the school down. We'll let you know when we can reopen. That was the first time I started thinking things were getting serious, and that everything else started shutting down. We were like, well, maybe we could go probably tour Europe. Then Europe shut down. I was like, fuck, what about Australia? Australia shut down. I was like, oh my God, how are we ever going to play and make money? There was no income. So I stopped making my house payment because I didn't know what the fuck was going to happen. All right. So he had a mortgage. He had a mortgage as late as 2020, despite I read in the book that he bought a fucking house. So like, that's weird. Thought he bought a house. I mean, maybe got a mortgage for a house. We were all scared. People were panicking, trying to sell equipment to make money. I was doing Cameo from home to make money, to buy groceries. I mean, you got to imagine he was making at least $100 a day doing Cameo. And there's a lot of things that Smelly could have done that weren't Instacart. Had to be. My sister sent me toilet paper because my niece worked at Home Depot, and she ended up getting a big fucking thing of toilet paper and splitting it up for my family. Remember when 4 years ago, toilet paper was a precious commodity. That's insane. Fat Mike says, and then contrast that with what Fat Mike says right here. Ready for this? Fat Mike says, I bought a place in the Valley like a year before the pandemic happened. It was a 9-bedroom ranch house, and I had my own wing because I was just getting divorced and I can't live on my own. I invited Baz, who's a great engineer and musician who worked on the Decline and stuff, and a bunch of S&M people. It was a crazy cool household with 9 of us. And when COVID hit, we grew vegetables and had crazy S&M parties, went bar hopping because someone would always set up a bar somewhere. And I set up my studio there. Even though I was getting loaded a lot, I always spent 2 to 4 hours in the studio every day with Baz. It was an amazing songwriting experience. I would give him a melody and a song I wrote on guitar, and the next day we would have drums, guitar, and bass done. It was like an instant NOFX demo, and it was so easy. Melvin says, we first found out it was Baz who was helping him produce and write songs during COVID. Mike would bring him an idea and Baz would provide the chords, or he'd be like, Baz, I want this drum beat here. I want to hear this part. And then he and Baz would record demos. But then I found out that Baz was re-recording stuff that Mike had played where Mike wasn't there. That's when I was like, what are you guys doing over there? Who's actually in charge? That is super weird. So there's like nobody on a NOFX demo. Fat Mike says, Baz demoed every song from single album, double album, and half album. We would work on them, and then I would send them to Smelly. I played all the guitar, all the bass, sing everything, and write drum parts. Baz and I wrote a lot of this shit, like The Big Drag. The band's feelings started to get hurt when I got with Baz, because other than Hefe, nobody was coming up to the Valley to work with me. I had the songs, but they really had the worst work ethic of any band ever. I mean, it sounds like to me, like, hey, you're not recognizing that your band is just trying to survive, bro. Like doing Instacart and Cameo, like what the fuck? I don't know. We were working on recording our then new album, Everybody Else Is Insane. Smelly would come up, do 2 songs and leave. I was just stuck with nobody. Songs like I'm a Rat and I'm Not Dead Anymore are very complicated, so no one would learn them. What am I supposed to do? They feel like I'm not including them, but they aren't learning the song. So that's the back and forth. I'm not including them, but you're not learning the songs. And those guys are like, hey, we're trying to just fucking survive. Melvin says, there was this whole thing of Mike needing to control everything, but also letting other people do it. That is weird. I'm going to control everything, but I'm going to have someone else do it, and it's not going to be you guys. They were trying to do what they thought he wanted, but he was not that specific and busy with a dozen other things. The wheels were falling off where we used to be this vehicle with 4 wheels that could go anywhere, and just became this broken wheel where the 3 of us were still going. We were dragging him out, and he was resenting us for trying to help. Fat Mike says, my band had a 3rd intervention with me. Could you imagine having 3 interventions with a band member. That's insane. The first one was needed, and it was awesome. About 15 years ago, I started drinking martinis before we went on. I stopped eating dinner. I was doing 10 milligrams of Valium, and I fell off the stage a couple of times. Brian Baker from Minor Threat and Bad Religion said, Mike, what's going on with you? You can't even play your songs. The band sat me down and said, you need to stop. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to dinner every night. I'm going to have mixed drinks with vodka and only take 5 milligrams of Valium. That worked great for 10 years. The second intervention was in South Africa, and that was whatever. But the last one, ... Okay, it sounds like maybe this is the big thing that dropped. It's interesting. He says, and that was whatever. I wonder what they have to say about the South African intervention. I think it's in the book, right? Maybe that's actually in the book. I remember there being more than one intervention in the book. Smelly says, I only remember 2 interventions. One was after a show in Boston like 20 years ago or so, because he was just a pile of shit that whole fucking tour. The other one was during the pandemic. He was becoming unreasonable, hard to deal with, being irrational, and making decisions without a consensus. El Hefe says, the intervention happened after we had a rehearsal. We had a nurse come and swab our noses to make sure we were clean, and we all wore masks. Mike stayed outside of the rehearsal building with his bass. He didn't want to be in the room. He was really freaked out. He made all of us test so that we could get together. We weren't doing stuff on Patreon. I mean, fuck, you fucking idiots. Like, of course. Why weren't you fucking doing Patreon? Like, duh. Like, and why isn't every band should be doing Patreon? Like, Patreon is built for fucking bands, dude, who have endless streams of content and material and things for an audience to consume. If you have check this out. If you have, all right, here, let me scale this up. Let's scale this up a little bit, right? Hold on, I got to do a little math here. I guess that would be 1,000 people. If you have 1,000, no. All right, NOFX has way more than 10,000 fans, right? If NOFX can get 10,000 people to be spending $100 a year on whatever their content is, and I have to imagine that there are 10,000 people in the world that would sign up for NOFX's Patreon. I mean, NOFX could probably still sell 10,000 records today in 2024, right? Like, they have to. So the idea of being able to get 10,000 people to spend $100 a year on whatever you're doing, like, nobody's got to be doing Instacart or Cameo. Like, what the fuck? That's really funny. He goes, we were doing stuff on Patreon where we would play live or be in the studio recording. Okay, so they did do stuff on Patreon. Sorry, I misread that. I went off the rails. We were doing stuff on Patreon where we would play live or be in the studio recording stuff. People could pay to watch us in the studio, putting together an album and learning the songs and all that, which, again, a gold mine. Fat Mike says, we played in my backyard and I fucking partied. There was a bunch of blow. I filmed a porn with 3 doms beating the fuck out of me and anal. And I can't say that on YouTube Live. And can you read that? Do you see what that says right there? I can't say that because this video will probably get demonetized anyway. He says they were beating the fuck out of me, and ANALLYRAPING me. Okay. So we know what was said there. Okay. I was going to release it and it would have been huge, but I didn't. Anyway, I hadn't seen the guys in months, but I saw them that weekend and I partied. On Monday, I texted the whole band, hey, we have this great offer for this commercial for one of our songs. What do you guys think? Not one of them responded. They always respond when there's money in the mix. So Tuesday night, I texted them, I guess you guys don't care about this offer. I'll see you tomorrow at the intervention. The next day, they all came for the intervention. And Smelly said, who told you? I go, you guys didn't answer a fucking text about money. So I knew something was up. That's hilarious. That is pretty funny. I mean, it's not a funny situation, but it's funny that he was able to deduct that there was going to be an intervention because you guys didn't respond about a text about money. It's interesting. It's easy for Fat Mike to be like, oh, you guys are so money hungry when he's sitting on a pile of fucking money. I mean, come on. Smelly says, and here's the thing. No matter what Melvin said to Mike on that airplane, and no matter what you want to say about these guys, clearly Fat Mike is their meal ticket, right? Like they need Fat Mike to make money. They needed Fat Mike to do NOFX. And they cared and loved Mike enough and had enough integrity for their band that they held a third intervention at the risk of alienating this guy who could blow up everything. And that's pretty much, I think, what happened, right? Like quite clearly, Fat Mike is walking away from NOFX. And those three guys are now left with, an uncertain future by the scene, as we've learned about, Instacart and Cameo and things. But it's proof that they love Fat Mike. The three guys, they love Fat Mike because, and there are many examples of this in record business and music business. They could have just kept their fucking mouth shut, let Fat Mike go on and on and on, and just make sure that they collect a paycheck. And that happens a lot too. And then people die. So quite clearly, they had their priorities in the right kind of way, I think, to an extent. Although some might argue not providing for your family, even at the expense of your friend's health, is maybe the right priority. I don't know. Smelly says, we threw the intervention down and said, look, unless you go to rehab, it wasn't about the stipulation of making him stay clean. It was just, unless you go to rehab, we're going to stop playing right now. We were dead serious because we can't sit here and enable him without at least trying to help him. It was just not a good time for us. And that was a serious intervention. So they loved him. They love Fat Mike, despite all of it, despite whatever Fat Mike thinks, whatever his POV was. The reality is, ultimately, if they were really that money hungry, they would have shut their fucking mouths. But they loved their friend. Melvin says, Mike was so rude to us at the intervention. And the whole time we were like, we're not trying to beat you. This isn't a competition. This is love and a request to please go to rehab. El Hefe says, he was so bad and so out of his mind. When you're an addict, you can't see yourself or how you're behaving in your mind. Everything's fine. Like, it's not me. It's all of you. That is very, very true. That is absolutely true. It's everybody else in the world. I'm fine. We bought Bradley Noel's best friend in to do the intervention because he's in the music industry, and that didn't go well. Do you know who that was? I bet you that was Z-Man. I bet you it was fucking Z-Man. Z-Man, who does interventions. They brought Z-Man in. That's fascinating. So he's Mike was pissed off about that and not taking it seriously. He was like, I'll show you. I'll do even more coke. I'll drink more. I'll do even more drugs. I got a book that says I can do drugs and that people are putting people down who do drugs and they shouldn't. I got a book that says I can do drugs and that people are putting people down who do drugs and they shouldn't. It was some pro-drug book that made some other drug addict. It was some pro-drug book that some other drug addict probably wrote. Melvin says, that intervention with Mike felt different because I found a place where I was like, I can't do this stuff anymore. I'm not who I want to be and not who I was. When I was doing drugs, the things I used to love or made me happy just didn't anymore. But once I stopped doing the drugs, those things came back. So I was trying to tell him that as a friend. I remember when you were this rad, happy guy and you're not even happy anymore. I love you and I want what's best for you. So I guess maybe Melvin is sober or pseudo sober or something. I don't know. Melvin, I don't know, man. Melvin seems like he has a good heart, man, and heart in the right place and everything. Fat Mike says, they sat me down. I went to my room. They said, where are you going? I go, I'm going to go do a line and have a drink because it might be my last one. They told me that they want me to go to this fucking rehab. But at the time, I was riding my bike 5 days a week and just partying in my backyard. I hadn't seen them in months. So it was like, you don't know me. You don't know how I live. Why don't they ask me how I'm doing or what's going on with my life, my divorce, and my musical? Why don't they ask me what I'm going through instead of you need help? So I went on a sober vacation to the Grand Canyon. And the second day I started throwing up and shitting blood. I was in the hospital and they said I had a bacterial infection, but everyone wanted me to go to rehab. So I went to rehab. El Hefe says, He went off and started on a bender in Palm Springs, but he started bleeding out of his mouth and his ass. Not just bleeding, but vomiting up and shitting out a ton of blood. Luckily, Gary, my manager for acting, was also working with Mike on projects and happened to be there visiting his mom. He had just arrived and wasn't far from the house when that Mike was renting, which I think belonged to the guy from Avenged Sevenfold. Gary goes over there and there's blood everywhere. So an ambulance comes and takes Mike to the hospital. The doctor told Gary that the use of cocaine and vodka was causing bleeding in the intestines. To this day, Mike denies that and says, no, man, I had chlamydia in my intestines. But the doctor told Gary differently. Wow. I mean, he just sounds like a fucking mess, dude. Melvin says, when Mike went to rehab, a lot of that shit disappeared from his studio. We went up there and I was like, whoa, where did all this stuff go? My guitars were there too. And they were like, we're taking care of it because we don't know who had access to the studio. And I'm like, well, I don't know who you guys I don't know who you guys gave access to the studio, but I need to pick up my stuff. I took everything I left there, but one of my Marshalls is still missing to this day. Smelly says, Mike went to rehab in the middle of the pandemic. And when he got out of rehab, it felt exciting. It was like seeing my family again. I don't know how it is with most bands, but when we got together, even if there's a lot of work to do or something, we end up shooting the shit and just goofing around and laughing most of the time. Our core as a band is that friendship and family. So it was really fucking cool to get together with all of us again. It felt like a breath of fresh air. El Hefe says, when Mike got out of rehab, it was the first time we started having those meetings where you go, okay, I want to do one last run. He had been saying for almost 10 years that he was almost ready to call it. So it was kind of hard to take it seriously. Like, does he really mean this or not? But here we are 10 years later and he's serious. At that point, I was able to hang out with him again. He got clean for a month and I went over to his house and started talking to him and thought, this is fucking awesome. He's back. Here's the guy that I met when I joined the band. I could hang out with him. I could bring my son over and go swimming. He's fucking cool. But that didn't last very long. Fat Mike says, we recorded 25 songs for a double album, and Bill Stevenson was bummed because there was just no way we were going to finish the album. At this point in my life, I'm not doing 10 to 12-hour days. I'm doing 6-hour days because I don't want to work that hard. But I'm the guy in the band who always has to be there. It was really important to me to make the first great double album because I don't think anyone has, besides maybe Pink Floyd. The White Album would have been a great single album. Not true. White Album is a perfect masterpiece. Use Your Illusion would have been a great single album. So I tried, but it gets in your head. You don't think about the songs. You think about a double album. You overthink everything. El Hefe says, that album seemed to take forever, probably the longest to finish. Everybody's lives were in limbo, and it was hard to get people together to record. Mike was doing a lot of drugs, and he was just re-recording and re-recording. It was also really hard to organize everything because Melvin was in San Diego and Smelly was in Long Beach, and we were all dealing with the pandemic stuff. Everyone was struggling, like, how are we going to make our house payments? What are we going to do now? Everyone was out of money, out of work. So it was a really hard time during all of that. Fat Mike says, I played it for 6 people, like Jen from the Bomb Pops. And I go, I really want to hear your views on this. I played them the second album first. And they were like, this is great. It's so fun. It's awesome. I said, take notes on every song. Then I played them the other album, the one that would become single album. And they were like, fuck that other album. This is the album. That's what I thought. That's what I wanted to play. That's why I wanted to play it for people. I never played an album for people to get their approval before, but I ended up putting the best songs on single album, and it was our best reviewed album ever, which is so validating. At first, everyone was like, you're putting a 6-minute song first, but everyone who hears it goes, oh, it doesn't sound like a 6-minute song. One of the reasons that song works is because every time I change a chord, the rhythm changes as well. You never hear a chord played the same amount of time as a different chord. It's always different. You never know when it's going to change. So it creates this tension. Or on I Love You More, or on I Love You More Than I Hate Me. Those lyrics are so fucking sad to me. It's about someone I'm very close to who really doesn't have friends, but the first part is about me, and then I move into them, and then my ex. Fuck Euphemism has maybe the best lyrics I've ever written. Oh, I also played this album for my friend Matt Sanders from Avenged Sevenfold, and he was like, I love you, but you don't have a ripper on this album. It's really cool, but it left me wanting more. I took that to heart because he tells it like it is, and I wrote and recorded Your Last Resort. That song kills it on that album. It's fucking gnarly and heartbreaking. I don't know how at their, these guys are pushing 60 and the way they jump on stage like that is insane to me. I mean, it's really crazy that they do that. All right, here we're at the final. Looks like we're at the final sort of leg here. Wow, this show was 2 hours long. Do me a favor. If you're still here or, if you're just joining us, please subscribe to my channel and please give this video a like, bump it up, leave a comment, participate in the live chat, say something. Let's take us home here. So double album came out in 2022 and half album in 2024. I haven't listened to single, double, or half album yet, but I guess this is like the final trio, right, of albums to check out. Fat Mike says, I was so proud of I'm a Rat. It's 54 chords in a row, and everyone played a little bit on that song, which is rare, as usually it's me and Smelly. Wow. Damn. Is he insinuating that Melvin and Hefe do not record on NOFX records? I don't understand what he says. He says I did 10 mixes, so it took me a couple of weeks to mix it, and I sent them the final mixes, and no one responded. No one said this sounds awesome. They didn't even respond. I got a response from Kent Jameson, our manager, and Katrina, our keyboardist, and that fucking cut deep. It's been like that. They don't care about these songs that I spent months writing. 54 chords in a row. That's fucking special. What am I doing this for? It's not fun for me anymore. The last song on half album, The Last Drag, is all about stuff like that. When they stop picking up the phone, only on your oldest and best friends. Sorry. When they stop picking up the phone, only your oldest and best friends can make you feel so alone. Wow. What a line. El Hefe says, about 10 years ago, Mike started saying, I don't know how much longer I want to do this for, and I'm letting you guys know now so you can start planning for your future and figure something out. Right about that, so that's 2014. Right about that time, I started taking acting classes and started figuring out something else to get into. When he finally dropped the bomb and said, hey, this is it. I'm going to do one last run. We'll go around the world one last time. It's probably going to take a couple of years to go around the entire globe and do every country. But I'm letting you guys know now that this is going to be it. I don't want to tour anymore. It was very scary. It was like a huge bomb being dropped. And we were all just like, fuck, we got to start putting our finances in order and figuring out how we're going to survive when the band stops touring. Now, look, I don't know what their band finances are. I don't want to judge these guys doing Instacart in 2020, but it's like, dude, you've been in a band. They've had to have made hundreds of thousands of dollars. How are you not fucking like, have you not figured out your situation yet? Like in some way, shape, or form, that kind of boggles my mind a little bit. I would want to imagine that each one of them had a stock portfolio set up in some way, shape, or form. I mean, punk rock is punk rock, but come on. Like, I mean, that just blows my mind. It was scary for all families or not. Come on. It was scary for all of us. And I think we're all very nervous still to this day. This is a major change and it's the fear of the unknown. How is this going to play out? How are we going to survive? Are we going to be okay? Everyone's trying to put money away and save to get ready for this. Melvin says, we've had so many conversations where I'm like, I can't talk to him. I can't take any more of the drama. And the other guys are like, just don't talk to him. Let's just get it over with. The final tour for Mike was all about, we're going to make so much money that we're going to be able to retire. That's not really our reality. The money's good, but it's not good enough to retire now. I really, even in this day and age, like I don't understand how if they toured for 18 months, they didn't each walk away with $1 million after 18 months of touring. They had to each walk away after taxes, after everything. They have to walk away with at least $1 million minimum. Like there's just no way. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking that, but like, I just don't see how it's not possible, especially when you have your own festival. Like it just blows my mind. Smelly says he sat us down like, look, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. We should do one final tour. We could play all these cities. We could do this. We could make this much money, but on the inside, and I'm pretty sure the other two are like, what the fuck, dude? We're listening to the conversation and entertaining the conversation just for the sake of being respectful. But it was like, okay, maybe that could be cool. Let's figure this out. It was kind of shit. But when Mike hears that could be cool, he hears that's cool. The ball just started rolling and I was never really 100% on board with it. I'm pretty sure the other guys weren't either. So in the end, as we've learned through this journey, In the end, it was Fat, and we knew this beforehand. It was Fat Mike versus the rest of NOFX. Melvin says he and I just started going head to head even more when he pitched it to us. He was like, here's the cities we could do. It's going to be millions of dollars for everyone. So there you go. Millions of dollars for everyone. I mean, and I got to tell you, I will say this as an aside, as a commoner, as a internet nerd talking about this. If at this point in NOFX, you have not gotten your financial situation together and you are doing Instacart or Cameo, wherever the fuck, I don't know what Melvin's situation was. And here you are, post-COVID, post those lean times, you have an opportunity to make millions of dollars and set yourself up in a way where you can propagate that. Because I got to tell you, as someone who's not making millions of dollars, who did not make millions of dollars, if you gave me that money, I would figure out a way to propagate it in a way where I could be comfortable, set myself up, create a financial platform of stability, right? So that's one thing where I'm just like, what? Like that's very hard for me to wrap my mind around. But, you know, again, I don't know what these guys' lifestyles are. I don't, you know, I don't know how it works. He's like, here's the cities we could do. Melvin says, here's the cities we could do, and it could be millions of dollars for everyone. That's what Melvin says Fat Mike said. But we were like, okay, where did you get these numbers from? He said he got them from the booking agent. And I think she might have said, you might be able to get that much money in LA. And he just assumed that's like, there's like 12 LAs in the US. We all knew it wasn't going to be what he was saying. It would be, but we had to do it. We all knew it wasn't going to be what he was saying it would be, but we had to do it anyway. So, right, they had no choice because they had to make the money. But here's the thing. Let's say it's not millions and millions of dollars, right? Let's say that it's not actually millions and millions of dollars. 18 months of touring, you didn't net $1 million from all the merch, all the stuff you sold, the Patreon, the guarantees. Like you had to fucking have netted $1 million. I just don't understand it. I don't get that. Hefe says, Mike said, I don't want to tour anymore. And we're like, fuck, this sucks. But we had tons of conversations with him about it. His thing is he wanted to finish on a high note forever. You don't want to wait until there's barely anybody paying to see us anymore, then stop like, okay, I guess we're going to stop since there's no more audience. That is also a valid point. But I would say that NOFX is more vital than they've ever been. Like they're not, maybe they're at a high point, but like you could still wait a few more seconds before you jump out of the building before it explodes. You know what I mean? A lot of bands do that where they say, I want to go off on a high note. Right now, we could do one last run, finish on a high note, and peace. We're out. We could say goodbye to the fans. And ultimately, that's what they've done. And they did it gracefully. It was done so gracefully. It was done very well, especially that last show and those final songs. Melvin says, we always somehow just found ourselves aligned with everything. A lot of the stuff that Mike came to us about or that we had a conversation about, someone would come up and say, something would come up and we'd all go, yeah. It wasn't always Mike with the ideas, but he's also the record label owner and songwriter. So he's really right on the tip of the spear. When he brought the final tour idea to the rest of us, I think we all knew this is something that has to happen right now. We all had our own reasons to keep going that outweighed the reasons for the final tour, but we felt like we can't keep propping him up and doing it to do it any longer. It feels a bit selfish and cruel to him. So they recognize how NOFX is kind of slowly destroying Fat Mike. Maybe Fat Mike recognizes that and can't stop himself from destroying himself. And so they ultimately acquiesce because they're like, maybe if NOFX ends, that it will be better for Fat Mike. And to keep it going is selfish and cruel to him. So Melvin does recognize that, despite what Fat Mike said about the 2000. That 2009 thing just sounded so like heavy and crazy, and I don't know, whatever. Fat Mike, fuck, I did not expect this show to be so long. My Lord. Fat Mike says, I can't be on stage pretending like I'm having a good time. So I don't. Instead, I do drugs, cocaine specifically, and I drink a lot of vodka before I go on stage. The thing is, I'm actually very healthy. I ride, allegedly, I ride my bike 30 to 40 miles a day and my organs are all good. My doctor says, well, if he's not playing that much, it's fine. Because I don't party like this at home. So Fat Mike's refusing to stop partying while he's playing. So what he's basically saying is, if I play, I have to party. And when I party, I hurt myself. So therefore, if I stop touring, then I'm going to be more healthy because I'm not engaging in this lifestyle at home. He refuses to divide the lifestyle from NOFX. That's the problem. At least supposedly, according to him. Fat Mike says, but I have to drink and do drugs before I go on to do a show because I have to have a good time. On this last tour in Edmonton, I was working out a lot and I wanted to play sober. I played the first show sober. I got through it, but 4 or 5 people in our crew were like, what happened? You weren't funny. You were just going through the motions. I told them I was sober and they said, what the fuck are you doing being sober? Nobody wants to see Fat Mike sober. That's a real thing. I don't want to do that anymore. I love being sober and partying on the weekends. I'm allowed to retire. So it sounds like him sort of like detaching. He's detaching from everything. He's shucking it all away so he can just go do his thing. El Hefe says, my take is that the drugs are just a symptom. And I think the drugs and mental illness go hand in hand. And we're dealing with someone who's really sick and suffering from mental illness and needs help. There are signs of mental illness there, and everyone and everything you take has side effects. The number one side effect of cocaine is paranoia. And I think he does so much cocaine that he's always paranoid. He makes things up in his head that just are not true. And those just fuel the fire with situations like the one with Melvin's wife. He's just out of control and doing a lot of drugs. That's what El Hefe says. Melvin says, I think quite a bit of my frustration with him was, hey, this isn't the guy you used to be. This isn't the guy that I knew for the first 20 to 30 years of our lives. I spent the last 10 years trying to push and prod and like, hey, how's that going to affect people who really love you? Can you see what you're doing to the people who love you? That was the kind of nature of a lot of the conflict. Here I am trying to make him see the things that I see, but it's not for him to see if he doesn't want to see it. It's such a cliche that the demise of NOFX is this guy's drug problem, you know? It really is. It really fucking is, man. El Hefe says he can be very abusive, yelling and calling people names and putting people down. We would deal with text messages at 3 or 4 in the morning, and there would be like 80 messages of him just saying the worst things you could possibly imagine to band members and their wives. We're all just waking up to all of it without knowing what's going on because it's the craziest rant. That's how he is verbally, and it turns into nobody appreciates me. Nobody appreciates what I'm doing. I'm doing this for all of you. But really, it's like we're worried you're going to die. We're worried that you're not going to live much longer. We're trying to talk sense into you. But you can't force someone to see the light and try and get their mental health together. It sounds like either El Hefe is either been in recovery or familiar with recovery or, you know, in some sort of program for codependency with someone who is in recovery or affected by someone who is in recovery because he has a really good understanding of it. Or maybe he just knows from Smelly who is in recovery. That's the reality of this whole thing. We're all adults now. We're all pushing 60 and he's still doing what you do when you're 16 or 20 or whatever. The end, 2024. Smelly says, I was eating lunch with this guy who I had just met that I was trying to do some business with. And my phone started going bing, 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 bing. I get like a million texts and I'm like, what the fuck? Did a fucking plane crash into my house? Mike let it slip that we were doing a final fucking tour without running it by us. It was like stumbling across your wife on Pornhub. My world just got pulled out from underneath me. Mike's a visionary and a fucking good businessman, but he's also going to do what he's going to do for better or worse. I don't mean that to sound like it's a selfish thing, but I don't want to think any of us were ready for that. We're ready for that day. That really is unbelievable. I've heard him tell that story before in a podcast interview. It's unfucking believable. Melvin says, without any meetings or any concept of how long the tour will take or anything like that, he just put it on some fan's social media page. He said, this will be the last time we play Edmonton or something, which it wasn't. There was a lot of fallout with us after that. And Mike was in this headspace of just not being able to hear anyone. He often comes up with ideas that aren't fully fleshed out and relies on other people to mold it into something beautiful. And I think part of his frustration at that time was just that it wasn't working for him. And he felt like he had to force some of those endeavors through to make his ideas work, even if they weren't thought through, like the final tour announcement. Fat Mike says, the last tour has been amazing. It's much more than I thought it would be. I thought we would draw good crowds, but the last show we did was in Barcelona. We did 3 shows, and after the first show, the whole band was huddled up and Hefe was crying while we were hugging. I'd never seen him cry before, but he said, "You were right, Mike. This is so special. It's because our fans of so many years are all coming. The audience is crying. We've never felt this kind of love before, but we just kept doing it. Normally we draw 2,000 to 3,000 people, and now we're drawing 15,000 to 30,000 submissions. So maybe they will end up making millions of dollars, or did end up making millions of dollars. It's like going to your own wake. We're not breaking up. We're retiring." That's so true, man. That's so true. By retiring, it's like you get to attend your own funeral, as opposed to breaking up and, you know, people talk about you after you're dead, but like, and you can witness it. But there's something about like, hey, we're still together, but we're not gonna be together for much longer. And so it really does feel like a wake. That is kind of, there's a beautiful quality to that. And they did it perfectly from a fan perspective. I think they did it perfectly. I cannot qualify as one of those fans I'm speaking of, but that's what happened. I can't remember the last time we did a show that was 2 hours and 14 minutes, by the way. This has been a long time coming. People are saying thank you to me all the time and much more than I ever thought I'd get. And I think it's so wonderful to have a beginning and an end. You can look at it and say, this was NOFX. You know, despite the craziness that they're portraying in Fat Mike, I think that there is a lot of truth to that. And, you know, a sentence, you can't read a sentence without getting to the period, right? That's literally what life is. That's the, you know, that's the quality of life and death. Death is what makes life, right? Death is what makes life as like a whole thing. El Hefe says, when we first started, it was very emotional. When we played our last show in Spain, it was like the beginning of the end. That one hit me. I was sitting there on the stage looking out onto the audience as we finished the last song. And instead of being like, thank you, good night, it was like, goodbye, Spain. We're not going to ever see you again. We'll never play here again. And doesn't it give it more meaning? Like life has more meaning when we know that it's not the end. We act all the time. We act all the time like we have all the time in the world. And so we take every day for granted. And the reality is that there's a finite amount of days. And he's realizing that through his tour, you know, that kind of thing. El Hefe says, I started tearing up, and me and Mike looked at each other and both started crying. As the tour kept going, we got a lot more used to saying goodbye. Smelly says, I've been really stressed out recently over it. It's pretty fucking weird, but the last couple of days I started getting kind of excited. I'm not financially or emotionally ready to retire. It's going to be stressful on the household because my wife is going to have to carry the whole financial load now. But the shows have been fucking, what is he spending his fucking money on? I swear to God. Like, I don't know. I don't know. He's like, I have to eat a tin of caviar every night and set hundreds of dollars to warm my smelly feet. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, again, like, I'm just trying to understand. Like, I'm thinking about it like from my POV. I think about like what salary that I make every year and like how I live. And I'm like Smelly, come on. Like what's, you're about to be set up with millions of dollars. I think like they had to have been set up with millions. I keep saying that. I don't know. It's weird to me. So he says, my wife is going to have to carry the whole financial load now, but the shows have been so fucking I don't think Smelly has kids. When the hepatitis bathtub happened, he did not have children. That might have changed. Does anybody know, does Smelly have children? Does Smelly from NOFX have, he has an adopted daughter. I know that, but she's a lot older. I don't know if that's going to show. It's not going to show me. Let me see here. No, that's not going to, of course not. Nope. Damn. There's got to be, does he have kids? Does he have more kids? Because I'm thinking, oh, well, you know, maybe he maybe I had a couple more kids, and that does, as someone with 2 kids, I get it. Smelly NOFX. Let's see, kids. Let's see here. Kids. Let me see here. He was so pumped. Sorry. I'm just checking. My friend's daughter. I don't know. I can't. It doesn't see. It seems to be inconsequential. I don't actually know. Ming says might be the adopted one I am referring to. Yeah, maybe might be right. All right, let's keep going. Let's finish this friggin' thing. This is too long. He goes, the energy and the love. Smelly says the energy and the love is nothing like I ever felt before. I never realized that we actually made a huge dent in the music world. We're just 4 fucking dumbasses, 100% on our own, all by ourselves. No fucking big team, no fucking lawyers. Well, we got a great publicist, but not like a fucking high-end PR team. We did it all ourselves. Seeing the reaction from people, it's fucking heavy and trippy and really cathartic. It's fucking humbling. I'm not excited for the retiring aspect, but the energy of the shows is getting insane. So it's interesting how things kind of enlivened once they knew that it was going to like end, right? Like it's going to end. And now it's everything's different, right? Fat Mike says, I can't explain how fulfilling this is for us. All of us came from families where even though I was a good student and went to college, my parents never went to graduation or looked at my report cards or anything. They kind of wrote me off. So I've always wanted to be seen. I've always wanted approval. So I really put it into my songwriting, and I've tried to make the band the best it could be, the best band I could be in. But I never got that approval until now. Now I see the faces on everyone. I mean, Fat Mike also had revenue coming in from Me First and the Gimme Gimmes too. May not be that much, but he had supplemental income from that. He's a partner in the festival, the Punk Rock Museum. Fat Mike says, and people are saying the nicest things to us about how much our band really meant to them. My fucking cup and heart are full. Melvin says, my feelings have evolved immensely over time, but I keep saying it's an emotional roller coaster. It's such a cliche, but it's just so true. It's like 100 emotional roller coasters all going at the same time. On one hand, I'm so stoked because we have a reason now to play all the deep tracks. Doing these 3 nights in each city is great because we get to play even more than ever. I've always been the one going, come on, we can just do a few more songs. And Smelly's always tired, like, hey, man, it's been an hour. I'm also stoked to celebrate and look at the whole thing and be like, we've done so much. You know, in just reading their reactions, like it really is kind of amazing how retiring allows you to like look back on everything. There is something to not like stopping like being active, but like retiring a chapter of something that you do. And for that, and NOFX is like the biggest chapter of their lives. Beautiful Planet says, to be fair, I think Mike is made. He was always vocal about how he diversified and invested, made a lot of money through other venues after NOFX. The other guys might not be set millionaires. 100, Beautiful Planet, you're 100% correct. And that's what we've learned in this revelation of this article. Fat Mike says, I'm a songwriter. I love writing songs. It's what I'm meant to do. When I wake up in the morning, I make coffee and I write a song, usually after kinky SCX when my mind is clear. But they go nowhere because my band's not interested in recording them. It's like Tears in the Rain, which is, from a TSOL song, Wash Away, as well as Blade Runner, what Roy Batty says at the end of Blade Runner. It's like Tears in the Rain. If I die, I have all these songs that people haven't heard, and I want my songs to be out there. It's my art. I stopped writing because I didn't know what to do with these songs. So I started writing for other people a little bit. Smelly says, when he would write the songs in the past, no one would say anything to Mike about it because he would just do what he was going to do anyway. It didn't really matter. So at some point we were just like, whatever, right? The love that he's feeling now more than ever is just because of the energy of the shows themselves. It's not an appreciation of all that Mike has done in my perspective. Yes, he spearheaded all of this, but it's just pretty fucking eye-opening of what we're all seeing. Playing live has a little bit of a different magic right now for all of us because we know that it's the last time. Melvin says, so many people keep saying things like, you made a sound, you made a wave through punk rock scene and it's yours and it affected everything. I don't really look at it that way. I look at it like we've tried to do the things we wanted in the way that we wanted, like all of the traveling and playing live. The 4 of us all had our eye on the same goals in hundreds of ways. And even as they started drifting off, most of us have always been in alignment on most things. Smelly and I have always been in the agreement that we just wanted to do this because we just wanted to, and we're going to find a way to not let it get old. That's how that wave took shape. And was just a bit of luck or fate that has always sprinkled a little bit of fairy dust on us. Fat Mike says, I've designed our career. I wouldn't say planned because I didn't know where we were going to get popular or anything. We never had a hit, even though Linoleum is our biggest song. There's no video. It never comes on the radio. It's just a song that touched people. I don't write hit songs. I write songs that I think we will really touch 10% of our audience. I'm not writing songs for everyone to like. A lot of our songs about my traumas, my philosophies, my life, and they're all honest. It's interesting. Fat Mike recognizes who and what he is and plays to those strengths instead of trying to be something that he's not. Melvin says, we didn't so much make the music that we thought fans would like. We made music that we like. We didn't do it for the fans. We did it for ourselves. Because of that, we enjoyed ourselves so much. And I think maybe that's what people came to enjoy and kept coming back to see. El Hefe says, I'm hoping that we go down in history as a band that did things our own way and didn't follow any rules or didn't follow any of the way that the majors ran their businesses. We did it our own way. I hope we go down in history as the band that just never crossed over and stayed independent, did everything their own way. I think that is what people are realizing, or people know that. Melvin says, I don't want to say we did it our way because that's such a cliche. Melvin's so worried about cliches, and everyone does it their own way, but we tapped into our own way of doing it and just did it, which is literally the same thing as saying we did it our own way, Melvin, but whatever. We never let emotions or fears deter us. We just set out to do it, and we did it. We started from almost literally nothing and never had a huge amount of success all at once. So instead of having all these big ups and downs, we had so many little ups along the way that any down left us still way better than we ever thought we would be. Smelly says, I just came to realize that we're one of those legacy bands like Ramones or Black Flag or other bands that really stamped in punk rock. We become one of these legacy bands. That was not apparent to me until this, and I'm sure that wasn't apparent to the Ramones until after they all died. We were just four fucking guys wanting to have a good time, and if it wasn't a good time, we wouldn't all be here. I don't have any words of wisdom as to what our legacy is, but we're just four fucking average dudes that started a band because we wanted to play music and have a good time, not because we wanted to be rich or famous or rock stars. Every day, it just got a little fucking bigger than the day before, and it was all natural. It was all on its own, and it was super organic. I mean, that's true, man. That's probably the reason why we're still here 41 years later. We were friends to begin with. We had zero expectations. All we wanted to do was play in front of 2 people, and then 4 people, and then 6 people, and then it just became what it became. Fat Mike says, they have my permission to keep going, but I'm not going to do it. NOFX is an extension of all of us, but the songs are an appendage of my life. People feel like they know us because it's not a gimmick. We're not putting on a show. We're just rocking out. All of my lyrics have been honest, and I'm an honorable man. I'm not tricking anyone by saying that this is the final tour. How dare anyone say that we're just doing this to cash out? I mean, we're cashing out, but it's our last tour. We're not Slayer or Iron Maiden or Black Sabbath or Motley Crue. What do all these bands have in common? They're fucking stupid metal bands. Punk bands really haven't done that. Melvin says, I was just talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, I had this vision of you in this old library, taking books off the shelf and dusting them off. And for the last few years, at least, I feel like I've been dusting off my own library to find my own center, as opposed to the band being my center. There's tons of fear of the unknown about like, how am I going to do this now? I don't have my guys around me to validate what I'm doing, but I'm also reaching out to other people all over the place. I talked to Brett Gurwitz a few times recently and realized he was a really good friend who I just hadn't talked to with enough because he's fucking led his own hugely successful life. The guy from Bad Religion and the founder of Epitaph Records. But he's also someone I can check in with and ask him what he thinks about things. My guys in NOFX will still be here too, but I'm also looking forward to a little bit of distance and having things outside of the band. He did that. He has a Melvinator record, right? Fat Mike says, oh my God, I want this fucking thing to end. I can't. The article about the end of NOFX has not come to an end yet. Fat Mike says, there's so much more I want to do. I'm going to relax more and golf more. I found my own happiness through kinky sex and being ultra feminine. And now I feel like it's Plato's allegory of the cave, where I need to share that knowledge. I'm like, hey guys, come out of the cave. There's all kinds of cool shit going on. It's the sun and rivers and whipping posts and and all kinds of shit. But a lot of people are all fine in the cave. I've also been reading a lot of Albert Camus, which is so interesting because it really came back into the play right now with politics. There are all these complete morons and horrible people who are Trumpers And then there's the rest of us. But it could go either way. What if Trump wins again? We've already made plans and they're not changing at all. I've already made plans and they're not changing at all. The world's a fucked up place. All you can do is take care of your neighbors and have a community. And punk rock is a community more than people know. Punk rock's a church, and punk rock's a church where we take care of each other and have the same value system. There's that photo of them together, their final show, really touching moment, the final NOFX show, final photo, band photo on stage, beautiful. Melvin says, I imagine Smelly and El Hefe feel a bit like me in that they can't wait to get the fuck out of here, but they're also terrified. We're a little bit older to start again, but it's definitely not starting again entirely. I'm sure if I release a song as Eric Melvin from NOFX, it's going to get more listens than any other 58-year-old punk rocker that suddenly released a song. We've definitely got to get a leg up on things, but the uncertainty is still scary to deal with. I've had people say to me, why don't you guys keep going? You're singing more than ever. Just do the songs. Just do the songs like that and find a stand-in bass player. But we've got to let the dust settle first and do some introspection. That's insane. I'm sorry. There's no NOFX without Fat Mike. You can't go on with that's bizarre. That would be bizarre. I don't think that would work. I don't think the integrity of that could hold up. That's just insane. But apparently Fat Mike has given his blessing, and it sounds like the other three guys want to keep playing and maybe keep playing together. And so there is a future out there. There's a future out there where NOFX soldiers on without Fat Mike, and there's going to probably be a lot of very angry people with it. I don't think that's something I would be interested in at all. I can't see any NOFX fan being, well, I don't know, maybe there's some who are just like, oh, yay, more NOFX. Melvin continues, but we've got to let the dust settle first and do some introspection. I want to get some music out and deal with some things first. But yeah, but in a year or 2 or 3, who knows? It's the four of us that have to come together to make it anything happen. Oh, okay. So maybe not. Maybe he's saying like the four of us, the dust needs to settle. I said to Joe, my friend Joe, the guy from Mr. Monster, I said, Joe, I guarantee you these guys are going to be back in 5 years. There's no way they stay away. But after seeing that finale and reading all this, I'm not so sure. But, you know, hearing Melvin talk, sounds like Melvin thinks that maybe something could come back. But as I said, I did like a YouTube show where I talked about this. Here's the thing about the finality and the beauty of that final decline that they did at the last song of the last show. That moment was the perfect period. It was the perfect punctuation on the sentence we were talking about. If you undo that, everything else, it erases the beauty of that moment. Let that moment live forever. That moment is immortal if you don't disturb it. And so that's the thing. It's like, do we want to disturb the dust of NOFX? So he's saying the four of us that have to come together. So I'm glad to hear that. You know, the idea of them just going on without Fat Mike, I don't think anybody would, no one would accept that, man. No one would accept that. He's like, who knows? It's the four of us that have to come together to make anything happen. So we'll see what direction everyone's headed and what state of mind we're in then. And that's it. That's the end. Woo! So if you're still here at the end, just know, and if it's your first time here, just know, hey, I have a Patreon. I do a lot of stuff. In fact, maybe I should make the Patreon. Should I do the Patreon commercial right now? I might as well. And fuck it. It's been a minute since I've done the Patreon commercial.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jeff. So I've decided to make a Patreon. What is Patreon? I don't know how to define a Patreon. Let me look it up. Patreon is a membership platform that makes it very easy for creators to get paid for the things that they're already creating. I want to do it full time. I want this to be my full-time job. In my efforts to make that happen, I've set up this platform. Is it going to work? Is it going to be successful? I don't know, but I would rather try and crash and burn than not try at all. The goal is to create enough passive revenue so that I can continue to do this full-time, uninterrupted. Why? Because I love to do this. I love creating content. I love making videos. I love shooting films. I love doing podcasts. In case you couldn't tell, I love to talk and I never shut the fuck up. So right now I've kept the Patreon incredibly simple. There's 2 tiers, and that may change in the future. The Murdergram is a simple way to extend support for all of the hours and hours of free content on the channel for nothing more than $1. 38 cents goes to Patreon. What's $1.38, eh? It's less than a cup of coffee, but it's a great way that you can show support for very little effort. When you divide that $1.38 by the hours and hours and hours of time spent listening to this endless drivel of content, the dollar cost average works out. Next up is the YouTube Casualty for $6.66. The YouTube Casualty is loaded to the gills. Enjoy the archive ad-free, as well as ad-free early access to special docu-style podcast videos, music reaction commentaries, and the like, a month before they drop on YouTube, loaded with ads, I might add. You're also going to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes content that is not available on YouTube or anywhere else. So you get to peek behind the veil. And believe me, there's a couple of choice pieces. Most of all, more than anything, whether you join the Patreon or not, I just want to thank each and every one of you that comes to the channel, that watches all the shows, that leaves comments, that participates, that subscribes. That's really the most important thing. This is just trying to find a way to earn a living as an artist. And with that, thank you for my TED Talk. Join the Patreon, because we need you!
66 cents.
All right, that's it. I'm burnt out. So check out the Patreon. Thank you so much. Peace. Air Grease. We'll see you next time. Beautiful archive. Lots of stuff in the archive. Check it out.